part of the Colorado, communities for, I do not.
I'm the liaison right now.
You want one less job?
Because I think it costs us $30,000 a year.
It's worth discussing. I'd like to understand what we've got out of it so far, and now that we work, that money be better spent. They're both virtual.
Yeah. Well,
There's probably a list of things.
all right.
Hi.
All right, good, thank you.
Oh, man.
Thanks for being here.
Oh, man. Who would have thought?
You guys are not on motorcycles tonight, I hope.
No, ma'am. It
My
actually-
goodness.
Oh, wow.
Went back to the road. 17 years.
Wow.
Yeah, it's
17 years on motorcycles.
Kick to the curb.
A big change.
Is that your union markup?
definitely.
I'm not sure, so I'm just messing with them.
Okay, we are live now.
Okay, okay.
Thank you.
Just wait for Mr. Seymour and then we'll.
Good.
I feel so grown up.
Hello? Testing, testing.
I saw the cutest thing. There was a
Can you hear me?
little dog, and they had the teeniest massager that had several little and it was just massaging all of its wrinkles and it was just
Not in here, but I just walked back in, so. You did?
Did anyone hear Counselor Zadi?
Counselor Izadi, are you here?
Testing, 1, 2, 3.
Oh, there.
Over here.
You guys hear me? This is Sarah.
Can you hear me?
You're echoing. Just a second. They're trying to work on it.
Close. A couple more minutes.
I have all your things. Everything's signed.
Gotta bring up the dog fight.
Oh, no. Like a literal dog fight.
I was gonna say, is this teenagers or real dogs?
That's what I was like.
No teenagers today. Just actual dogs. He always gets in the middle of it. He's the one who ends up getting hurt because he's just there trying to mind it.
I have to tell you, Counselor Baker agrees like that second one,
He only has one eye, so he doesn't.
the second guy in principal.
So do I.
You got it in there.
That's a really great rallying
I think so.
call for a city manager.
But if we put it in, we have to at least attempt to achieve it, don't we?
That's right.
We'll achieve it. You put it in, we will achieve it.
Are we, I mean, start saying we're in a meeting, or are we still working on something?
I think we're working on one more connection.
Ryan is right behind you. It looks like he's making progress.
Didn't know you were there. Stealth.
IT people are very, very sneaky.
I got a new, well, I didn't get, I ordered a new laptop so I can maybe finally do emails from a laptop instead of using
Would you order?
other. I gave it out. It just has to do with, they're the ones that put shades.
The shared sense of community. Okay. Just that, these couple things.
I told him what I needed. He gave me 3 choices.
And just bring them as suggestions.
Yeah. And I said, take number 1.
Oh, yeah.
Because he said number 3 was the next one. We're gonna want that. I don't need software. So I'm excited, and it will be here to teach. And he'll help put everything on the
Yes. Artificials. Throw a little bit of vodka in there.
You can't phone, you can't. So someone can't phone in like they usually do.
Worked out late, so I can shower.
Because they're on their second pending warrants.
Oh.
Face is all stiff.
Okay.
I only did 3 sidewalks and 2 driveways and 3 sidewalks today because I didn't use the snow. It was only
First 10 minutes of every meeting.
But by the time I was done, up there, and he sits there like a little gentleman. And then when he gets roaring hot because he's all black, he gets back in his bed.
That's the mayor's strategic advisor.
I love it.
I'd like to try to do computer work. I was over there trying to fix up on the website and he keeps coming up and
He was trying to. But sometimes Larry has this game he plays and it has a circle thing. So I use Gibbs pause and he sometimes does very good for him.
It's funny how kids and pets would, at the beginning of the pandemic, and we all were using Zoom, how they all would just photobomb everybody. The cats would just automatically jump up and wander across.
Well, and on days I've had 2 or 3 in a row, Gibbs will have had it. He will get up right here and he would put his paw here and just stare at people. Nobody could see me. He would just be right there. Pop every time. You'd forget what you were there talking about.
I think I met many of my colleagues' kids via Zoom because, right? They just pop in.
Yeah.
Mommy.
So we are live on YouTube on our stream. We're just trying to get the last 2 in, so just so you're aware.
Those of you that are listening, we're just trying to get the 2 counselors that aren't with us live tonight on so they can participate. So be patient. You guys still doing good?
Yeah, he's doing well.
Obi, I haven't talked to see if we can hear him.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
We can.
Yes, we can hear you.
Can
Awesome.
you guys hear me?
Volume if you want.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can
Yes.
hear you also.
Okay, great.
Hi, Ryan. It sounds like everyone can hear each other.
I think we're good.
Can you hear me?
It's 5:11 on 2/22/22, and we have a special study session. Mayor Pro Tem Demott, Mayor McNally, Councilor Emmons, Councilor Seymour, Councilor Baker are in person. Councilor Numela and Councilor Izadi are remote, and we also have
Jody Andrews, interim city manager.
And Cody Blue, our assistant to the city manager.
Shannon Flowers with Barry Dunn. Michelle Kennedy with Barry Dunn.
So we on January something, on Saturday and Sunday worked together, did a lot of hard work, and tonight is about hoping to finish up that work so that city manager has direction for himself and the crew throughout the city to be working on the strategic plan. So I will give it over to you and welcome, and thanks for being here in
Thank
chilly
you.
Colorado.
We appreciate the opportunity to be in person with you. It's always, I think, really helpful. So we do have a little bit of work to follow up on. We were asked by all of you to put it together into a document, a cohesive document, with bringing back to you your objectives as you originally envisioned them, so you could see the work all together in one document, and then work through those remaining pieces that people weren't completely sure about because you didn't have a chance to see it all together, and also maybe fill in some areas where it might be a little bit thin. So you've got at least one strategic priority where there aren't a lot of objectives there. So we need to think through that a little bit and make some decisions tonight about what you'd like to see. So one area that you really asked us to work on, and it's on the first page of your document, were the guiding principles. The feedback we got from you all was that they weren't really very clear, and you wanted some crispness and clarity to those guiding principles. We got some input from you. So we're going to focus on the first page, take you through the mission vision with a strong focus on the guiding principles, because this will be the first time that you've had a chance to talk about them in their new form. Make sure that that everybody has a consensus perspective on those, and then we'll work through each of the strategic priorities after that. So let's start with the mission, and just have you read through that and see if that's ringing true to what you were hoping for. I think there is a decision point on the mission statement. There is a word choice there that you need to make, cultivate or foster. I don't think we need them both, but you can make a decision about which one you think is more descriptive.
For those listening, if you don't have it in front of you, it's Westminster's purpose is to provide core services, and here's the two words we have to choose from: cultivate or foster economic resilience to give our community the opportunity to thrive.
So any preferences? Yeah, any preferences around the word?
Like foster, because we're here to help support the economy, not make the economy or drive it. We're just doing our part to massage it.
Anyone else have a thought about that?
One just quick question. Were we supposed to have a document that we should be looking at that was sent to us, or is it all just going to be on the PowerPoint? On Wednesday it was sent?
Or it's under agendas, under our city government on our webpage.
Mayor Cody Urban here is going to resend it to all of you. So it pops to the top of your email box. So Councilor Numela will come here in the next few seconds.
Okay, thank you.
So again, we'll read it out loud while you're waiting for that. The mission statement that the group crafted together is Westminster's purpose is to provide core services and choice of two words, cultivate or foster economic resilience to give our community the opportunity to thrive.
Councilor Baker, do you have a choice?
I was leaning towards really of the cultivate, but basically Mayor Pro Tem convinced me Foster's better.
Councilor Seymour?
I like that line of thought that Mayor Pro Tem brought up also. It was a toss-up for me, but I'm leaning towards Foster now.
So we
Well-
did a definition exercise the last time.
Yes, we did.
I was leaning towards foster, but looking up the definition of foster, encourage or promote the development of something, typically something regarded as good. And cultivate is prepare and use land for crops or gardening, or try to acquire or develop a quality, sentiment, or skill. So to me, both of them kind of work together, but I think fostering makes more sense for business sense. Okay, so
Councilor Izadi?
I think either one works.
Councilor Namella?
Well, I'm definitely partial to cultivate after just reading the,
can you turn up the volume?
But-
I'm really struggling to hear.
oh, is mine not very good? I'll try,
All the way now.
here. Is this any better?
No. We'll just strain our ears and listen.
Okay, sorry.
On that.
I'll come really close to my computer. Does this help?
Go ahead.
No, okay. I like the idea of cultivate just because it means like we're doing a little bit more in terms of when just listening. And I did read the same definitions as Councilor Emmons, and it just struck me as something that we're kind of preparing for and doing things versus just letting something kind of encouraging it to happen. We're actually taking some actions to make it happen. So that would be why I would lean towards cultivate. But
Currently, we have 6 that were okay with foster, 1 with cultivate, so I think it is foster.
All right. So let's take the vision statement. I'll go ahead and read it out loud. Westminster is a city of beautiful, safe, well-maintained neighborhoods and destinations with a vibrant, diverse economy, rich and resilient environment, and a strong sense of community and belonging. That's what you hope to become. You're in the process of being that.
How detailed are we going to get about the words? Because I really think you did a fine job on the document, pulling out the essence of what the meeting was. And where I might I would like to say a suburban city, but if we're not going to agonize over every word, we can leave out suburban, but I'm quite proud to be a suburban city. So how picky do we want to be?
Well, I think you feel good about that it's right, but not so picky that we are wringing our hands over every word. So finding that happy medium.
Really, both are right for me.
Anyone else? Councilor Seymour?
I think overall, not, word by word, but overall, this captures what we discussed. So, we could do this and that, but just as an overall.
Close enough?
Right, absolutely.
Okay.
Hearing nobody else, I think we're good.
All right.
Mayor, may I jump in and just assure you that our live stream audio is really good?
Okay.
It's just the room audio on our virtual speakers so that the public is hearing good audio.
Oh, good. Good to know.
I'm sure our phones will start heating up like it wasn't working so
I just
well.
jinxed that story.
No, our community's good at saying, hey, hey.
All right. So let's move on to the guiding principles. And again, this is your first opportunity to discuss what is actually on the paper. So we took your ideas and we tried to formulate statements that we believed captured the essence of your thinking. So let's go through them one by one. The first one being collaboration and partnership. So the statement is enhance and sustain our relationships with neighboring governments and community-based partners, leveraging our resources. I think we could pick one or the other. I don't think we need them both for maximum impact and benefit to Westminster. Anyone?
I would go with assets.
Okay, Councilmember Baker likes assets. Anyone else have a preference on that? Gosh,
I'm over here. Trying to think about what they're saying.
Is that on video? Can we replay that? Shooting pen.
It wouldn't go down and went and did it.
James Bond, it's a James Bond pen.
I haven't even said anything yet.
This one's broken. Real. Firing.
Was it you that wanted
Yes, yeah. Okay, resources or assets? Speak up.
I'd go with resources. It's a little broader to me than assets.
Not hear her.
Resources were broader.
So Councilmember Nirmala said that resources, she believes resources is broader and more encompassing than assets. I'll try to repeat.
Yeah.
No hard.
One of the community groups I work with, they have no assets as you think of assets, but they have a ton of resources because the people that sit in their pews and whatnot. But, so I would probably tend to go with resources.
Councilmember Emmons, you liked resources as well? Okay.
Is there a reason you like assets over resources?
Because resources was so broad. If we're going to be in partnership with other people, I think we should only make promises on what we have, not on what we could get.
But I look at it as we don't have everything those other resources have, meaning the other partnerships. And we need each other. That's how I look at it.
That's fine. I have no problems.
Councilor Izadi?
Resources.
I was just curious. Whenever you-
Not fair.
Good discussion. Then I'll be ambivalent if you're agnostic.
There you go.
Okay, well, we've got four that say,
We can wordsmith
resources,
that.
so we're good.
Okay. All right, we'll go with resources. Stewardship and thrift is the next guiding principle. Responsibly manage all of the resources entrusted to our care to meet the needs of today without sacrificing the ability to meet the needs of the future.
I really like that one.
Yep.
That's good. That was the high mark of this whole one.
We need to nail down 2 hours worth of
I think that might have had the most conversation of anything the whole weekend. And Councilmember Baker got that whole concept of thrift in there, so. All right.
Did we, did that lose the sustainability term? Hardship and sustainability?
What's that?
She said that it lose sustainability, but from the way I read it, sustainability is, it's in there. The virtue of what it means to be sustainable is encompassed in the statement, in my opinion.
Right, and means more than the words to sustainability in my mind.
And it really talks of today and of the future, which is sustainability.
Without sacrifice.
Well, instead of without saying it, why don't we just say it? You know, responsibly manage all why isn't it like stewardship, sustainability and thrift, or, you know, because we had sustainability in there. And I think that's a key element to how we want to be running the city is sustainably. you're saying it's being said without being literally said, so just say it instead of inferring it.
I'm fine as is.
I'm fine with this.
I think it is direct and we tried to get, I think part of our discussion that weekend was being very clear in the words that we use and not using the term sustainability, which I find to be an overly broad term. This is, to me, it gives direct what we're trying to do.
And I am fine with the two that are.
Councilor Izadi?
So I think sustainability makes more sense than stewardship.
Okay, we don't have direction.
No.
So we're going to leave the second guiding principle, stewardship and thrift as is with no changes? Okay. The third guiding principle is transparency and accountability. Engage in two-way dialogue with the people of Westminster, clearly communicate our intentions and decisions, and take responsibility for all that we do, thereby earning the trust and confidence of the community.
Thumbs up.
That's good to me.
Councilor Izadi?
I like it.
Councilor Namella?
I guess it'll be fine.
So we'll leave that one as is. The fourth guiding principle is diversity, equity, and inclusion. And the statement is achieve processes and outcomes for the people of Westminster by providing opportunity for all voices to be heard and drawing upon community diversity in decision-making.
This is really the only beef I had with this whole. I would like to add before outcomes individually earned. Because as it stands now, one could misread it to say we want not only equitable processes, but we want equitable outcomes. I think outcomes are earned from what an individual really desires to earn. Not necessarily equitable.
Don't disagree. I don't like outcomes being in there, but I mean, that's just because outcomes are gonna vary depending on people's, as you said, individual input into a process. So we can make the process as good as possible, but if one of us is faster than the other running a race, that's I don't want to in there that says we're always going to provide the same outcome.
And I would be fine with really dropping outcomes too. I think that's another excellent solution.
To just drop equity? I can't hear that well.
Councilmember Nirmala, the suggestion was to
There's some I'm sorry, you guys. There's some feedback. Is everybody muted? Okay, sorry, Michelle. Maybe try again.
You want me to try again?
Yes, please.
Okay, so the suggestion, Councilmember Nirmala, was to add individually earned outcomes or to delete outcomes from the statement. That's being discussed, that's on the table right now for discussion.
Oh, I'd keep it. I mean, equity is about trying to get everybody, you know, to have the same opportunity. And sometimes that means helping them out a little bit more. And to get where, if they've started at a, you know, a disadvantage. So that's what the meaning of that is. So I don't see a problem with implying that there's some effort that we will make, like affordable housing, or, housing for seniors, or working with people who are experiencing homelessness. That's outcomes can certainly vary in what the outcome is. But it's things like internships for high school students, any program that is helping to train folks for a new type of career. So that's what that is.
Councilor Mayor Pro Tem.
I remember having this discussion about the difference between what people think equity is. And if you go to the definition of what equity is defined as, it's defined as the quality of being fair and impartial. And I think that that's the whole thing that, in my mind, we want to get at with equity is fair processes. That means that we're being impartial and everybody who gets in a process has the same fairness to the process. So,
well, it's really what equity is in terms of people and what we're talking about in a social movement towards equity, and not about the straight definition of equity. It's in relation to diversity, equity, and inclusion, and what we mean by that. And honestly, if we don't have a common understanding of what that actually means, we should have a training session on that so that we can all get on the same page.
I don't believe I need a training session to make me feel the same way about what equity is as you do. It's a simple difference of opinion. It's not a matter of being trained into what it is. So you said what the definition was when we had our retreat. That's what the actual definition is. To me, even if you look at something like a scholarship, which is the example that you just gave, I might take that scholarship and decide I'm really going to put my all into it, and somebody else might take that scholarship and completely squander it. There's still individual responsibility with outcome that nobody control but an individual. I often have this conversation with our kids, two of who have some mental health things. At the end of the day, we can give them all the resources in the world, but it still belongs within their control because people can't do it for you. And so I do think that if you talk outcomes, if you're going to have outcomes in there has to be some thought in the fact that an individual does control to some extent their outcome. We all have a different starting point in life, and that's just the reality. But outcome still is determined by the individual, because you either can try or you can't. If you don't try at all, nobody can try for you.
Are there other perspectives?
Hi, can you hear me?
I too have concern about the outcome part of it. I would be more than welcome to Councilor Baker's addition to that myself, because it's either that or remove the outcome part of it. So that's my concern.
Councilor Baker, one more time, what did you add?
Individually earned. I think Councilor Mike wanted to have something.
Councilor Izadi?
Hi, can you hear me?
Very
Just
late.
barely.
I just was going to say that equity is not simply equal treatment. That's not what equity is. Equity is making sure everyone has a fair chance to have equalized outcomes. That is the social definition of equity. That may not be the dictionary definition of equity, but that is how, in practical terms, that's what we mean when we say equity. So I would be in favor of keeping outcomes, because equal treatment is not enough for some people. People start off from a more disadvantaged beginning than most of us did, or than most of you did. So what that means in practical sense is, how do we make their starting points more fair? Because most people start off from a more advantaged standpoint than many others do. So when we talk about equity, that is what equity is. It's about making sure everyone has a fair chance, and some people need an upper hand because they start off from a lower starting point.
Are you in favor of adding the individually earned outcomes?
I'm in favor of keeping it as is right now.
I'm in favor of adding individual or dropping it. Either one will work for me.
I think dropping it would be a better solution.
Because I think, I don't know who said, maybe Baker, Mayor Pro Tem, outcomes seems like we're assuring an outcome in that, I think it makes more sense to drop it, go with whatever council decides, but I think it makes more sense to drop just outcomes that kind of muddies the water and assurance that we can't provide, so.
But I would, if we're not going to add individual outcomes, then I'd rather just drop outcomes.
For people to say drop.
All right, so we're going to amend the statement as is to remove and outcomes. So the statement will read, achieve equitable processes for the people of Westminster by providing opportunity for all voices to be heard and drawing upon community diversity in decision-making.
Yes.
All right, let's move to the next one. Innovate and initiate. Foster a culture of continuous improvement and approach opportunities and challenges with drive, inventive thinking, and resourcefulness, resulting in a resilient and sustainable future for our city.
Two thumbs up.
Yeah, no changes for me.
Councilor Namella?
I'm fine.
Councilor Izadi?
Good.
That one stands, okay. The last one is prevention and proactivity. Solve problems at their source and focus the city's policies, practices, and investments on prevention and community education and addressing root causes, leading to better quality of life and greater prosperity for all in our community. Did we do it? That was the one that we struggled really hard with. I think it makes sense.
Should we say a better?
Before.
Grammatically, is it a better quality of life?
Just a second, we can't hear you at all. Go ahead, do it again.
Grammatically, is it a better quality of life?
Yeah, I think you might be right there. We can add the A.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you, Councilmember Nurmela. All right, well,
Councilor Izadi?
Hey, quick comment. So I love this, but I just want to mention that the terms quality of life is an outcome. So it's greater prosperity. That dropping outcome from the equity statement doesn't make any sense.
It's not an outcome. How is it an outcome?
Let's just move on.
Any other comments?
so I think we've got, I believe, on the mission statement, the vision statement, the guiding principles. Yay. All right. So Shannon's going to start walking us through the strategic priorities one by one, and you can see that we have some notes there. If you have color copy, they are in blue. Notes, so take it away, Shannon.
Yeah, thanks, Michelle. So what we did, based on your request after all the work you did over that weekend, we consolidated all of the objectives for each one of the strategic priorities, and it was that had gained three votes or more, correct? Yeah. And they made it onto the list for objectives.
Can we pause real quick? Sorry, so that he can fix their audio.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry.
Absolutely.
Okay, we're taking a break.
Senator Malik, could you say a few words so we can hear you?
Yes, can you hear me?
You must feel pretty good. 1A.
Keep going.
1A.
Do a test.
Testing, can you hear me?
Yay!
Thank you, Ryan.
All right. Can we start back up?
All right. Excellent.
I like that. That's great.
So what you see under each strategic priority are the objectives that had support from 3 members or more when you were polled as a group. We also have in the appendix all of those objectives that were put forth for consideration that didn't get enough support to make it onto the list. So if there are any of these strategic priorities that you feel like need to be beefed up a little bit, we have that as a starting place for conversation once we've gone through the ones that exist on the list. Sound like a good plan? Right. So the first strategic priority, preparedness and resilience. Build a system of intentional support for residents, businesses, and the environment that mitigates risks and proactively seeks out ways to ensure the community not only endures, but thrives. Everyone still feels good about the language for that priority.
Yeah, I think we worked pretty hard on the goal
Yeah.
statements for those priorities in the session. I'm not saying that you still can't tweak them, but I felt like we got really close on those with you all. So hopefully we can keep the focus on the objectives tonight.
On each of these, I'm just curious, tonight, if Jody, if you and your team have an opportunity to look at these, so you can call out that
That's what
they
I'm
don't
gonna
make
ask.
sense.
Make sure that you can have accountability and have goals that are going to work with things. Now's your time to speak up, because it's your crew that's going to be feet to the fire.
So I'll read the first tip and just see where it falls with support. Again, mitigate the risk of fires, code review changes to mitigate the danger of wildfires, properly maintain open spaces and trails to decrease those same fire risks and hazards, and hazard mitigation. So there were a merging of several different original objectives under that one.
And we can work to wordsmith that into a more, to a very crisply cohesive written objective. But if you like, we just want to make sure you still, 5 of you supported that, you still like it. We can work to fine-tune the language of it.
And we certainly remember this was on the heels of the Marshall Fire. And when it started and we had to evacuate our 19 homes that backed up against one of the biggest open spaces, and knew if that had caught, we were in trouble because it could have followed all the way through the city. I think that's where this whole thing came, because we realized we don't always cut down that tall, I call it wheat or whatever it is, and the weeds. And so I think everybody had a lot of discussion about that.
Looks like everyone is still in support.
Yeah, I would just say one question for Jody is, were we going to update our hazard mitigation plan? And this is like super focused on fire, but I know we have floods as well, just to like round out the opportunity. So is that something that we would be doing this year? And therefore, do we just kind of throw that in there? To acknowledge that there's more, obviously wildfires is, shockingly obvious to us right now, but to expand it a little bit.
We can certainly do that, especially if it lands in an objective. I can check as to when the next one was scheduled for the hazard mitigation plan update. They are done regularly, but I don't believe annually. Or council could indicate that here.
Because it's in here, so upon looking at it, he can get a hold of you folks to see where we're at in the cycle or whatnot, and if it makes sense to keep it in there.
And just a reminder to the group, there's an assignment that we still have to do, and that is to crosswalk the objectives in the existing strategic plan with the new one and come back to you for you to provide guidance on anything you want them to stop doing and stop pursuing. So that'll be a step that we do after tonight.
All right, the second objective there, create a more structured business support system and a business rep or facilitator. So make sense to everyone?
Basically, at this point, because we did spend so much time, if you have questions or objections to this, speak up, otherwise we're gonna keep moving.
Yep.
Anyone? Okay.
All right. Reimagine the process of development so we can create the community we want.
I like it. I don't entirely remember what we meant by it. It seems very vague as far as.
Yeah, it's brought from.
Councilor Baker?
Really, part of me thinks that this is where we take a bigger hand in the comprehensive plan. Because so much of the comprehensive plan was in detail decided by staff. And then people are constantly coming to us to change it. So we should take accountability for it. And then if someone wants to change it, they have to talk to the people who thought that what's there is best.
If we do, focus, and I agree this is vague and that maybe if it is pointed at the comp plan, then we specifically say that. But I would say, we need to make sure that if we are making changes to the comp plan, that it is a very public process and we go through another public review draft, as well as a process before that to get towards any changes, because we want to make sure that we're hearing from everybody in the community, and that should be measured against the demographics that we're getting our input from.
Anyone else?
The other thing that I wanted to add to this, that's along the lines of what Councilor Baker just said. To me, we want to, and I know that we're doing some of this, but for whatever else we can fit in here, one of the things I've continued to hear as we go through the water discussion is about the conservancy piece. And for me, I don't disagree. I just think that there's some difference of how we can look at it. I think it's very different to change the rules on people who already have a home, that have already put a lot of time and effort into it. But we absolutely can and should mold future development to make sure that they're doing certain water-wise practices. And I think that that's an area of opportunity that we can continuously see as the city reaches build out or redevelopment, because those are opportunities where you're not changing the rules on people, so to speak. It's, and it makes sense for us to do moving forward. And I think that that should be part of that objective.
Anyone else?
So we want to say that, to reimagine the process of really development, so we can, to create, the community we want through basically a really comprehensive plan that is tied to envisioned water use.
So that is that's a bullet point under our
The robust infrastructure.
Yep.
Okay,
So
never mind.
we can move it up, but I'm noting that it's already mentioned
Excellent.
somewhere. So.
Never mind.
Reimagine is another one of those buzzwords lately, and so can we think of a better word? Reimagine just sets me on fire.
Why don't we say of the really execute the process of really development?
Would you say execute?
Well, it's the process. I wouldn't, the process of development is, it's in our charter, it's in our code. So unless you want to go through a charter and or code change, like what are we actually picking out here? If we're talking about development that is representative of what the community wants and needs, then that would be through a very public process to update the comp plan and or do another round.
And as we've said, the comp plan is in the robust infrastructure. It's an objective in the robust infrastructure. So you can either move it up or you can leave it where it is. And then it seems like if you don't move it up and you leave it where it is, I don't know that this third objective is needed.
That's what I was going to add, because we've got that elsewhere. This is a little bit vague without bringing in the comp plan and the processes of the comp plan. So I'd be okay with just dropping this part out, because we get the points later.
That's fine.
So on the floor is to just not have this last statement. Going, it's out.
Mayor, I can provide clarity now. The fire chief advises that we are tracking towards updating the full hazard mitigation plan this year.
It's nicely
Yeah,
objective.
So with striking that third objective, do you want to add another objective and look at that, the appendix and the other ones that were discussed prior, or do you want to leave it with the two?
Let's get through everything first. To me, it's the quality of what we need, not the quantity, because some of these are heavy lifters. And so I don't know how City Manager Andrews feels, but are you okay with going through it first and then seeing if, when we look at the list that's left, if anything does need to go someplace else, we don't have 6 things here and a heavy load. I mean, let's set ourselves up not for staff that hasn't worked together for 2 years in-house, and everybody's still partially virtual, that I just think we do what we know we need and don't make things up.
Excellent.
That makes a lot of sense. Thank you, Mayor.
All right, then we will move on to strategic priority number 2, proactive public safety. Enhance public safety to emphasize both prevention and enforcement, engage the community through education and outreach, and provide the resources necessary to ensure safety and well-being throughout Westminster. Our first objective is to attract police and firefighters to choose Westminster as their place of employment.
I feel like this one's kind of vague again. Because what are we doing to attract? Like that. And we're kind of now buying to CDA process as far as getting that attraction. That makes sense.
It's kind of squishy, but with that being said, there are, with the DBA forthcoming, I mean, we're not in a contract yet, or are we bargaining yet? I guess my question, not being the one who goes through that process, is for Jody. Like, I could think of some things that I think we could do that would help attract, and I've talked about some of them and asked for us to look at them, such as how do we expand Medigap or give like a partial Medigap so that we get people who say have 10 years of experience from somewhere else that maybe could take that their remaining 15 years of their career here, but still be able to participate in that. Those kind of things are going to be what sets us apart from our competing municipalities. Other things is, what kind of training programs or incentives for people straight out of school potentially. I know if you look at what Denver has done in the past, granted Denver's much bigger with a bigger probably bucket of money. But I know when I was looking at being a police officer when I was young, and I know my dad went through the same thing when he became Denver, they have a program that they do schooling as part of it. So they get their 2-year degree as part of it. So there are things that I think that would set us apart from cities of our size that would fit in that bucket. And so I almost feel like, you know, you do want it to have some teeth to it, but at the same time, with the fact that we have a CBA coming, does this give you the ability to look at stuff like that potentially wouldn't be negotiated on incentives to get people to join those careers? And I think both those examples are something that you could do for police or fire. The meta gap, I certainly would encourage us to look at for police and fire. I know that we have offered it across the organization, which is nice, but to me, these are very different kind of careers that people's bodies aren't in the same place when they're done with a 30-year career being a policeman or a fireman compared to somebody else. And, you know, I think that they should be well taken care of when they're done with those jobs. So I don't know your thoughts on that, Mr. Andrews, but that's kind of my thinking of why that's important to have it in there.
I think that first bullet is important to have. I would counsel to not put specifics in there with respect to pay or benefits, just because when you do enter into collective bargaining, there's two parties involved in those discussions, and I would keep it open for that. I think we can work on this wording a little bit, though. You know, we could talk about, for example, there's elements that go into you know, attracting, but also say retaining our people is critical in this objective. So we could provide, you know, just something like we could provide a work environment with competitive pay and benefits to attract and retain police firefighters. Along those lines.
Well, why don't we just say hire instead of attract?
To hire.
We could
Yes,
have
thank
a
you.
lot of people attracted, but if you don't hire them, it's nothing.
Jody, can you repeat that?
Provide a work environment with competitive pay and benefits to hire and retain.
Could I would like, because, and so this is one of those things that maybe it's something that's an objective for the next 12 months, you know, then we meet it. But I think that we need to set an actual goal to say, you know, we're short how many people, that in the next 12 months, we're going to decrease that by X percent that we think is reasonable. Like, I'd love to see it be, you know, to normal attrition rates, but I know that might not be feasible in the next 12 months. So I'm open to hearing feedback to something that you think is aggressive but attainable. But I do think that we owe this community to actually have a goal to say we're going to actually make meaningful impact in the gap we have in our police department.
So along that line, because usually goals and objectives come with deadlines, and it looked like on the rate of schedule of where we go with this, I didn't know if that was supposed to be here, if it goes back to staff to set those deadlines.
Thank you, counselors. And Michelle will weigh in on this. If you look at next steps, number 6, staff will develop. So once City Council does step 5, which is prioritize final objectives, which is what we're working on tonight, partly. And then the next step is staff will develop outcome and performance measures for final objectives. So once you set these objectives, the next step actually is worth visiting that. So then staff is actually this is step 2. Step 3 is staff will crosswalk the new strategic plan with the existing one. We'll then come back and review with you those elements that didn't translate over, and you'll give us direction on which of those elements to continue or not on. Then you'll prioritize the final objectives, which you're probably mostly doing tonight.
Yeah.
Then step 6 is we'll develop outcome and performance measures. And that's where I think we would put key performance indicators on these objectives with help from Barry Dunn, as well as timelines. So that would be at the point after tonight when we get through to it. And then you can tell us at any time what you're already thinking for those, and we can fold that into our work.
And to your point, Mayor Pro Tem DeMott, it could be that Jody and his crew say, wow, you know, it reduce or to reduce the number of vacancies by X percent in the next 12 months. I mean, that might end up being a key performance indicator or metric.
So that, I mean, and that makes sense. And I appreciate understanding that process a little better. But does this kind of, like, if there's specifics like that tonight, that probably is helpful to at least say we'd like to see that.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Yes,
no, that's
because
very, Very helpful.
And I imagine then at that point, if you come back with one, if we want it to be more stringent, we could discuss that at that point.
Yep.
Great.
Anyone else on the line?
All right. Second objective that's listed, civilian report writers that are appointed by the court ensures community that full investigation was done.
I think that there's a misconception of what this is on here because I don't think they'd be appointed by the court. They would be actually hired. It would be FTE positions that we would actually hire that would be doing, and when we say civilian, we're not talking volunteer, we're talking non-commissioned, basically police staff. That would, and I don't know if
I
that's,
think I screwed that up.
we started talking about costs, I think.
Yeah.
We
And I was
can-
like, oh, it'd be nice to be
Swear-
part.
swear
We
your
can
heart.
volunteer, not hired.
I don't know if there's opportunity for those folks to do anything in other parts of the organization. I'd leave that to Jody, but I imagine as you look at some of those other KPIs with number one, imagine there could potentially be crossover because you may be able to shift workload. Would be taking some work off of the commissioned officers. Do you need as many if you're adding this different kind of staff? Potentially, maybe the answer is yes, because maybe they're already overburdened, but it's probably worth looking through that as you think about what success looks like on that.
And I would think you'd have to talk with those officers, so we're sure we're adding support, not more burden.
Agreed.
Councilor Baker?
I didn't understand this when we were talking about it, but so you don't want the officer who is the primary witness to write the report?
Let me give you an example. So you have a couple different kinds of crimes. You might have an active situation that's dangerous. That's where the person with the ability to make a situation safe shows up. Potentially, maybe they do write the report because they saw things that need to be in that report, or potentially they work with somebody who makes that report. All too often what happens, and this isn't just our city, this is a lot of different cities where, say Denver, for example, say, hey, a laptop was stolen on my car, they give you a website and you go and fill it out. I don't think that's the kind of support that a lot of people expect in certain crimes. So give you a different example. My car's stolen. If we have officers who are out dealing with situations that are more dangerous, that's going to fall by the wayside. If we have somebody who that's their job is to actually go take those reports, make sure that you're taken care of, they collect all the information that would be helpful down the line. If somebody is apprehended that ends up being linked to that, you get that whole process instead of them not being able to take that report. So it's in some ways, I know that you have talked in the past about reimagining how we do policing. To me, this is one way that you can do that we continue to provide the level of service that our officers that do the job today do, but being able to shift some of the workload that they do, and provide better service, better data collection. Because if you think about some of the data collection that happens in some of those crimes that sometimes maybe they're not able to stay there and gather the details while it's fresh, is if they catch somebody who's on a crime spree that say broke into like 5 cars in one neighborhood, they might be able to link somebody to that down the road by collecting that data appropriately. My preference would be they always collect that data, but the reality is sometimes they're too busy. And I think you get a different level of person who'd be willing to do this job versus the full on go carry the gun and do the more dangerous part of the job.
So in other words, this is basically a customer service or citizen service thing where we would really triage the calls. And if there's no need to send a uniform officer, they would basically, citizens would have someone who could walk them through to better.
That works for the PD.
Report.
Correct.
Great.
Any other comments?
May I read from the police plan of action that was talking about this item? And that is, effectively adding professional staff to alleviate increases in workload across both professional and sworn positions and to create opportunities for more field time for sworn personnel. So that way it's outcome based, right?
I'm glad you brought that up too. Is that something that you could just, I'm sure that I can dig it up, but not everybody was on when that came out. Could you recirculate that study to everybody so they up and potentially, I don't know if you have somewhere that says here's the parts of that we were already planning on doing, say this budget year or next budget year, so we can understand where that is. It's been a while since even, I mean, I've got an update on it.
Okay.
And in a sense, this sounds very much like our event investigator that we have.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Which I think we have a track record that program is super successful.
Yeah.
In fact, I believe we are working on an update on this that would do exactly that, which is so give you a line by line from that police plan of action and then talk about the status of each of these elements, because there's quite a few elements in that plan, as you recall.
Remember, it's very robust.
So, and we've made a lot of progress on them. So we're going to, I'll commit tonight. We'll send that, we'll get this document out to you right away tomorrow, and then we'll follow it up very shortly with a public report on the status against this plan.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
One last chance. Anybody else have any comments? Okay.
Okay. The next one is to increase double co-responders.
I support both these next two. They're kind of like just different areas, but I also would like to have at some point have an actual metric that says what we're going to increase or double to. I don't want it just to be like,
Yeah.
Let's increase or double it. Like, I think it should be driven by meaningful impact. Like if we did 2, how much more could that do? I feel like if you're going to go through the budget process and you can tell me if you got 2 more of these, here's how many people would be served by those 2 people. Or in the instance of like the co-responders, how often are they not able to show up to calls? I think that would probably be a better way to go about it.
What's
Like
our gap?
Yeah, what's the need? Like how often are they not able to participate? And I don't know if you could judge, because I know that there's been talk about extending that to the fire department. Do we have any idea what gap that might create? Because that's, I don't know what kind of call volume you think that would actually address. And I imagine you probably have some idea since it's being asked for. But otherwise, I'm supportive of both the next 2.
Anyone else?
I am fine with the next 2.
Good.
Our onliners?
Yep, I'm good with those, and I like Mayor Pro Tem's thoughts about trying to get a gauge for what those would be, what the need is.
Councilor Izadi? Okay, got direction.
Okay. Next up, strategic priority, shared sense of community. To foster or cultivate equitable opportunities that help residents feel at home and connected in their community and empowered to live their best lives. First discussion should be whether we like foster or cultivate.
I think we already established we like foster better, so we just go with that.
Nice discussion point there.
I was raised with a grandpa on a farm, so cultivate to me is what he did with.
That one resonates. Right, and the objectives listed here, the small groups did not really pull for support last time because this one, everyone felt like it was a little bit more fishy of an area. So I'll go through and I'll read them and then we can kind of discuss and see if there's also a couple of recommendations that staff sent out cover as well. So the first one is supporting neighborhood organization activities to strengthen neighborhood, I should say identity.
Oh, yeah, identity, not a.
And this is one that was moved from that
Identify the
proactive
purpose
public
for it,
safety.
just the wrong one.
Restart the Westie Fest and other events. Restart movie nights in neighborhoods. And this is one that did, when staff looked over these, they had a suggestion about combining these two and rephrasing it a little bit.
So I have a quick question on those
Yeah.
two. Those were also on the appendix, which confused me because was it supposed to be
So
what happened here?
they're back there because you didn't poll on these.
Okay,
You didn't poll on these, and so we brought them forward. And we left them in the appendix too. So we got to figure out if you want any of these in here. And it looks like the first one, though, was moved from public safety, as the note says there, and there were 3 in support of that.
Well, I would just say in terms of equity, a lot of neighborhoods don't have defined organizations. So going back to how do we foster or help neighborhoods organize, like a neighborhood toolkit or something like that, because, right, we don't have, Denver's got a ton of them, right? And they're registered neighborhood organizations called RNOs. We don't have anything like that. We have a lot of HOAs, but there's a lot of the community that doesn't live in an HOA. And so how do we kind of do that same thing in other areas of the city?
I think we do some level of stuff. I know the PD does, because with like National Night Out, if you actually sign up, whether you're a HOA or not, even community members could do that. So maybe that's expanding on those kind of programs and educating the public that they're there. But I know like Neighbors for Countryside's not an HOA, and they always work with the PD, and the PD will, help buy ice cream or whatever for your event and make sure that they stop by when we do National Night Out. There's a lot of different groups that do that kind of thing. So might be a good starting point for it, at least.
The foundation's there. It's just how can we foster that?
Yeah, it would be helpful to actually understand, do you have in terms of community organization? Some are HOAs, and like you mentioned, Mayor Pro Tem, there's neighborhood, groups. I don't know how, and then how are you organized in terms of your neighborhood? Is it formal, or just word of mouth, or what? I don't know. If we're going to say we're going to foster more neighborhood organizations to do X, Y, Z, be helpful to know what level of organization, how are we going to reach them? Who are we contacting? How are people knowing they could get involved?
Really, maybe this is a good one to give back to Barry and Dunn to crosswalk with what we've got already.
right, and when I look at the Restart Westy Fest, Restart Movies and Neighborhoods, we need them to have one of our booklets, because it's all in there. I mean, I told you that one day I had bing, 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 bing. I can know that all these things are happening. They may not be called this on here, but they're already on people's calendars. So if you look at some of that stuff, it's already happening.
So I know you've harped on this before, but if you want to be able to educate the public about stuff like this, I mean, we used to have the I don't remember what they called it, but the paper that went out to every single house in the city, and that's how you would educate people. I mean, truly, the only way that you're going to hit everybody is to do something like that. I think that we should use the opportunities like the movies in the park kind of thing, and Westy Fest, and whatever events you do, to have a table where you have this kind of information as people pass by. But I feel like, and we heard about it actually out walking in the election. I'll tell you, the number one place most people heard about was the citywide mailer that was done. I heard about that more than any piece that I sent out. It had, that kind of thing works, I guess is the point. So I certainly would be a proponent of bringing that back. And if you want to educate about these kind of programs, that would be a fantastic place to do it, whether you do it quarterly or monthly or something.
So would you be comfortable with us bringing back some recast objectives for this, maybe 3 or 4 real crisp ones that we can craft based on some conversations with Jody and his team to understand what's already happening.
Works for me. I was gonna say some of this probably is already part of the event they're working on.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah,
We could- And
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, a lot of this seems focused, not all of it. I know it's a lot of event-based things, but like making people feel at home is also giving them an opportunity to engage in their community. And so I think there could be a community outreach goal as well. There could be things about, emphasizing our inclusivity board, maybe having them, contribute to ideas. Just something, like we used, I don't know if we still do it, but we were doing some like out of the library, the Irving Street Library. We were doing some helping people understand their leases in multiple languages. So just towards that part of helping people live their best lives is also kind of just providing things like that help them live more successfully in the city.
I think a community outreach objective makes a lot of sense. We could write something. Yes.
One of the things I wanted to touch on, because I don't know if it really belongs in this area crossover, but when we were talking about establish neighborhood watch, citizen patrol, I would really encourage us to look at, and I think I heard that they probably are, but ramping back up on our academies, as well as our Citizens on Patrol group that came out of that academy. Some of the things that they would do in those areas were kind of teaching people about safety inside your own home, the things that you can do in your neighborhood, watch out for. Well-informed citizenry is going to be a safer one. And so putting some of that back out there for people to participate in, I think is a win. I just don't know that it belongs under here. That might be back under the safe bullet one.
Well, and as we talk about going out and being with the public and wherever we choose to do the pop-up tents, anytime we've had a plethora of handouts for people, they've never seen it before. They have, let's face it, not everybody wants to navigate a website to find everything you need, but when it's right there and you have enough people to sit and talk to them about what all's here and take it home and read it, they're excited. So we have those opportunities coming up. So for you folks, you just don't know all the things that are already set up. So between calendars and whatnot, you need to take a look and you'll be able to write something up pretty easily. Because there's a lot of repeats right here. And my calendar says so.
All right, then we will take this list and some of the conversation right now and rewrite 3 to 4 objectives and bring them back to everyone.
And we already are in partnership with the North Metro Alliance that Lindsay's a part of. And I don't know if they do or don't need our increased participation. We pay a pretty good sum, but they do great things and work with SCFD to get other money, and they produce some great things. So, and when we do look at the arts and cultural stuff, some people are just talking downtown. Some people are talking historic Westminster. It needs to be in every section of Westminster, not just downtown.
Great point. And the other thing that's jumping out at me right now, and I think that we went back and forth, my recollection about where this one goes, but when I read the quality of life strategic priority goal statement, the piece on the arts fits better down there than it does in shared sense of community, because it says that honor the city's history and support the arts, parks, recreation, open spaces, and libraries. So I think that moves down. And I think it needs to be restated to make it more broad. Yep. So we'll do that.
One thing that we could do in terms of just reflecting who we are as a community is also just have like Westminster stories of just people sharing their story. It could be a website so that it's more of a way for people to interact and share like, oh, I've been here for 50 years, or I've been here for one, and just letting lots of voices just be shown and showcased. So Denver's done stuff like that. A lot of other cities have done stuff like that to just kind of celebrate their diversity and their history. So I don't know exactly where that goes. I kind of feel like it goes here because it's helping people feel at home and get to know their neighbors.
Councilmember Namella, it could be folded into that whole community outreach objective. And we could, maybe give some examples in the objective of what we're talking about.
Okay.
All right. On to quality of life. Ensure that Westminster offers a diverse range of amenities and activities for residents, businesses, and visitors that honor the city's history and support the arts, parks, recreation, open spaces, and libraries. This one, we've got 2 objectives, and we'll be moving down that one on the art, so you'll have 3. The first one, an objective around the acquisition of open spaces and to complete trail connectivity.
This was around, we just had a vote of the people that they passed, and we know time is short for pieces getting bought up and whatnot. And if we need pieces to connect, or if there's a piece of open space, we absolutely should be getting. It's time to act, because the rest of it will be going for maintenance and taking care of what we have. Jody, this is our last chance.
Jody, is this one where your team could help us craft an appropriate objective based on what Mayor?
Yeah, I have no
The
idea
mayor
what's
just
on the
said.
list anymore.
Yeah.
So they do. And are there obtainable things on there that they've looked at, or is it we need to either do that or very specifically communicate to the public, this is all going for maintenance.
Yes,
Okay.
I think the team will want to work on that, and listening to the mayor's perspective, we can capture that.
Excellent. So we'll take that one.
Find that with staff.
Yeah.
Okay. Next one, the city pays for dog license fees through the general fund.
And this was the one where it's only a small fraction of dog owners who actually purchase the license, and the vast majority do not. So they almost ride for free on the people who pay. We would still require dog license. We'd still have our job. It's just that a citizen could send in an email or something that had, well, the rabies tag with it, and then they'd be sent back a dog license. They would now have a licensed dog. So it was picked up by our really animal control. They could get him back. And so this would almost be encouraging the people to follow the law instead of what we do now, which is, we know most people don't do anything about it.
Is this something that could be handled outside of the strategic plan? It feels a little granular.
Yeah, it's
For the strategic
Goal
plan.
and an objective defined.
it should be in the budget. It's not I mean, I think.
But overall, it's to foster more participation, which adds to safety. I understand where you're coming on that.
Yep.
We could throw this in someplace to the budget, but
We could also lift this opt to be less granular,
Oh.
we could work on a, something along, enhance the city's dog license program to result in what you just said.
Maybe. I feel like I'm throwing a wrench in it, but I feel like parking has been an issue at a variety of spaces for Westminster. So maybe like programmatic approaches to, because even at dog park mentioned. So
Almost all of our parks.
yeah, like can we maybe make it into maybe a more programmatic approach instead of, and then with the focus that this could come to us at a budget line item in the future. Because I think we have a kind of a broader problem, bigger problem than just dog licensing fees, if that makes sense.
Yes, we have people that won't go to downtown because they have to pay, or they don't know how to pay. I got that from.
I would support both of those things. I mean, I ask that those don't get lost because I think that Councilor Baker has a good point on the dog licensing. I've actually talked to a couple of people about this because at first they're like, "Are you guys crazy?" But if I talk through it, because they're like, "Well, who's going to do it?" I'm like, "Well, there would still be I think there needs to be a penalty if you don't do it." So it's the carrot is you get it for free. The stick is if you don't, then you do pay. Because I think that having the dogs licensed is actually lends to public safety. Because there's no reason not to do it. How you go forward with making that happen, that's up to people who make the sausage, not us, I think. But the same with parking. I think we need to evaluate whether or not we really should be enforcing some of the parking, especially in the downtown. Because I have talked to people who've got tickets down there and they were appalled. They're like, "There's nothing down there," and I got a ticket. I'm like, "Welcome to Westminster." It's not really what we want, and I understand why we want to do it, but I think it should we should take a look at it too. And I don't know what the answer for it is, but we should try to address those concerns, whether it's the new downtown or our parks. I think probably the most emails I've got is in the Westminster Dog Park. And I totally understand what people are saying, and I understand why it's a problem. But if you go up there and look, which I have, people who park there and then they try to turn out right where 100th comes out onto Sims, it's very dangerous because people are hauling up, and now you got the bike lanes there, and it's just become a perfect storm. So, it's just one other example to address what you both are saying.
Yeah, I think it's like for parking, just providing greater clarity, because even I get confused. going down there and like the app didn't even work for me. So yeah, it just needs to work better if we're going to do it. And if it's supposed to be free for a certain amount of hours, that should work that way. It didn't work that way for me. So if I can't do it, come on.
What color is that ticket that you get?
I didn't get a ticket. I had to just pay. I thought it was going to be free if I registered my car, but I paid instead. So, but whatever. But like pay my city $1.50. But yeah, just clarity. Because if people, I just don't want people to be confused and have that be a reason not to come to any place in our city. So, but whether it's a park or it's downtown. So.
Well, there again, 4 of us don't know what the plan is downtown. I've heard everything that we pay $500,000 a year for this parking group. So maybe at some point, a little conversation so we can get up to speed just to understand what is happening down there would be good. So you've got 3 things down there. Are we good?
I think so.
Councilor Izadi, we good? Okay.
He's probably talking. He's muted.
If you're talking, we cannot hear you.
All right. Robust infrastructure provides safe and equitable access to core services and amenities, by safeguarding, maintaining, and improving the city's water, wastewater, stormwater, mobility, and roadway systems. We have 4 listed under here. First is to address the water treatment plant. Second is to provide education on water conservation, a natural resource to prevent exploitation, destruction, or neglect.
Continue.
Okay.
I hear nothing.
I see heads
Well,
nodding.
isn't it like provide educate, I'm just reading it and absorbing it, but like provide education and on water conservation, but also are we trying to expand any of our programs that are meant to, get people to conserve water? And for the first one, I think a little more clarity, address the water treatment plant. I'm hoping that's going to be expanded into address our water treatment system and delivery and long-term viability.
It's a 2-year plan. We can only do so much in 2 years.
Well, we're trying to do it in like 2 weeks, so. Right.
I don't disagree, but we, up above too, on the priority, we make it a priority to maintain and improve city's water, wastewater, and stormwater. So, we just haven't gotten far enough down into that spot yet, but it's definitely our priority.
Again, I think this is where we can get a little help from Jody's team on the crafting of the actual objective statement. You guys have captured the idea.
Right.
Now let's get it.
They can take what they're currently working on and what they expect to be doing over the
Well,
next
and
couple of years.
I've been asked by a counselor to do some of my research and ask, I heard about the water bills. I never asked the question, how much water were you using? So that's been my question of the last week. And I've heard that. So I believe under provide education, I know Rich has a great neighbor that we could consult with because he knows exactly how to water lawns and still have a green lawn. But these people use the same amount of water, but this is their water bill. So it's not that they use more, it's just because of our rates. So if they want to lower their rates, we just need to help with different size lots. What does that look like? How often what's the best time to water? How much do you water? How often do you water? And how many times a week do you water? Because in walking this last year, I saw sprinklers going at 2:00 in the afternoon, 100 degrees, and that is not the time to water. And so, and I know there's only a certain point where we can get word out as best we can, get it out in City Edition or whatever, where that hits every home and help people understand what it takes. But there's some proven formulas that will work if you follow them. So I just think after hearing some of the numbers I heard, we have a lot more work to do on educating.
I would second everything that the mayor said, because if you think about it, you buy your first home, you don't really know how, even if you get something with a big lawn, there's a science to it, and some people are better than others. I would bet you're all better than I am. I'm keeping your lawn alive. But it needs to be, it needs to be realistic. So I don't know how to bring this up without sounding like I'm harping on things that we've done, but one of the most frustrating ones that we put out was the sprinkler math, because if you look at the sprinkler math video that we did, there is no residential, potentially even one of our parks, that have as many sprinklers in one zone as what they were saying in that video. It's not realistic, and people, that's where it got stopped. Nobody was listening to what you were saying anymore because they were too mad about what it was saying. It
was ridiculous.
It didn't help. But I think you could use those same things to say, here's how often you should water your lawn. If you water your lawn every other day, here's a suggestion. If you live in an odd number street, water Monday, Wednesday, Friday, like things that actually help people water their lawn in a reasonable fashion that actually keeps it green, but doesn't waste water. I think that's the kind of education that we could do that, is not self-defeating.
When I was reading out loud what you're discussing that was on Facebook, my husband, who I didn't even know he was listening, I was reading it out loud because it just wasn't making sense to me. So I was reading it out loud, thinking I'm just reading to myself. And he comes from the living room, and I can't repeat everything he said, but it was, there isn't a place in this city that has the manpower to have the pressure to do that in anywhere. And he said, "What are you reading?" And I said, "From the city's website." So, true. Okay.
All right. Third objective, complete sidewalks in parts of the city that lack continuity and bring sidewalks up to ADA compliance.
Is this something that, I imagine this is another area where there's certain plan that's already been carried out that we could kind of see what the rollout is and where we're at so far, because I see it in the neighborhoods where we're doing the ADA corners and stuff. The other thing I'm curious about on this, because I've heard it multiple times where we put those in and it causes unintended consequences, that it goes too low and it ends up a gathering spot for dirt. What's the proper channel for residents to get that rectified? Because I know, like, even actually in front of my parents' house that happened, and he mentioned it to somebody, saw somebody from the streets out there one day, and my dad went out and said, "Hey, do you know that this is screwed up?" So, and they came out of it, but like, it'd be better to be able to educate people how to go out and fix it instead of running into Joe DeMott. He's famous on Next Door.
The last objective listed is the one about the comp plan, to complete and address the comp plan update.
Yep.
I'll just state that with respect to the plan and being under infrastructure, if you sort of imagine a healthy city having all these different, inputs, right? And you turn the dial on one input and it impacts another input, right? And so we have to be looking at our comp plan and our land uses and our growth in a way where we don't turn a dial all the way over to one thing and we become incredibly unaffordable and we don't have any economic growth. And so so there's a calibration that we need to be looking at on multiple levels, aside from just like one piece of this, right? So that's the caveat with having it in this particular, in this bucket.
Which bucket would you put it in?
Yeah.
I don't think she wanted to change the bucket. She just was giving the warning.
It might not, I've seen other cities do this where you might have an objective that shows up as your priority if it's integrated across several. So you might want to bring up the comp plan in more than one strategic priority because it's the underpinning of so much. So there would be no problem in repeating it.
We'll leave that up to the wordsmith.
Yeah, I could sort of see it under quality of life.
I could see that.
Yep. Yeah.
That's where I was going to offer that alternative. And then I wondered if council wanted to add back in that qualitative gauge on this one that was in the earlier deleted version of it, to create the community we want, or something along those lines. So address the comp plan update to create the community we want.
Oh, right. That was the one that got.
We lost that point.
Right.
We could have it in all three spots and it would not conflict with any of the other ones at all. It would enhance them.
Yep. Good point.
Could we, instead of saying what we want, can we say what the community wants?
Why?
Yeah,
That's what I wrote. Yep.
yep.
Excellent.
So I think one thing that was missed that I know that I have talked about, and we all communicated about it, is a more focus on our roads and our roadways, because the condition of them in Westminster, it's consistently underfunded, not prioritized, and it is one of our core services. So I'm just putting that out to our council, to the council, that, I mean, that is a mission of Westminster's core services. And I think that infrastructure piece for roadway is lost. We focus on our water, our sidewalks, but I don't think that we have enough emphasis and priority on taking care of our roadways.
Okay, so why don't we put it under the robust infrastructure?
It is a full statement, but I think Councilmember Evans, you're talking about maybe a specific objective. Yes.
We do have our roads condition index.
I was gonna say, is this something that maybe staff could help fill in what the objective is? Because I imagine there's already a.
Yeah. And it'd be very qualitative and quantitative.
Then we could look at it and say we would like to be more aggressive or.
Yep.
I can't
Right,
imagine-
yeah, what do we want to change about it, right?
Right.
And from people, what they see and what they feel in their cars, it didn't, some would rate it worse than any of our water.
By the way, there's really big potholes on Federal Parkway.
Noted.
But I figure, hey.
Okay, what else do we need, youngins?
I think we accomplished what we intended to do. Perfect. And we have some work to do now to bring back to you.
Okay.
Great direction.
We're good.
Cover everything 15 minutes early.
Whoa, did we?
Thank you.
Yay.
We have a next agenda item, look at water rates, but we need a 10-minute break. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Don't fall under the house.
I hit one on chairs. Yeah, it's hard to avoid.
No,
Oh,
All right.
we're all live on the front. Okay, we're ready, Mayor.
Let me just make sure we have Counselor Namella.
Yeah, because that should be 3 years, correct?
Yes.
Hello?
Oh, did you hear me?
Go. We can.
We can.
Okay.
Counselor Zadi
Yes.
and City Attorney Franco.
I'm here, thank you.
Okay. Who's doing what?
If I could ask for a personal point before we begin. Okay, as we all know, about what, 3 weeks ago, when I first came up with some proposed different really scenarios, one of the questions I asked, was the water module a module?
I apologize.
We're good?
That's right, carry on.
Okay, so I asked, was the water module a module? And we couldn't answer that question. And Max gave really Director Kirschbaum gave the answer that it was much more complicated than that. At our Thursday night meeting, both the CEO of Denver Water and the Deputy Director of Greeley Water both talked about plug and play modules as if it was a typical industry-wide thing. We also learned that there are no lagoons at the Boulder Water Treatment Plant. Because this whole effluent wastewater is taken care of through a whole different process. And our site on Westminster Boulevard has a significant amount of property dedicated to sludge lagoons. So I'm really disappointed how a meeting of professionals sharing their knowledge with us could answer my questions about, is this a plug and play module, which it is, and treatments for sludge, which obviously exist that don't have to go through lagoons. So I'm really disappointed from our staff. Counselor Obi, last time we met, talked about trust. And he's absolutely incredibly right. There has to be trust. But my question is, how can we trust our own experts when they've been shown to give not complete answers? How do we make decisions if we can't trust what's coming from our own professionals?
Coming from the jacket over here.
Just let it ring, it's probably mine. I leave it in the car, but it was too cold. So that's for us to talk about, for us counselors. I mean, really, Counselor Azadi, do you have any thoughts on that? Because you were present at all of the meetings and you heard the same misleading answers from our really Director of really Utilities, that it was not a plug and play system, that it was not raw water in one end and finished out of water out the other.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, so that's not my takeaway from that meeting, from the roundtable. I think your question to the staff is a completely different context to the answer we got from the roundtable, because those are two different systems. The staff was telling you that we do not have a plug and play as per your question to them. We could have one, is what I got from the Denver takeaway. We don't currently, so I don't understand the question then.
Well, because on the map we have, it's actually designated a module. Remember, we've done 30% of the design for the Westminster plant. Now, some of that's in these pipelines we have to build, of course, but some of that is in the actual design of the plant. And in the Water 2025 documents, there's an actual dimension of the module building. It's called a module. It's 102 feet wide by 344 feet long, which leads me to believe that is indeed a plug-and-play module, just like Denver and Greeley and probably other of our sister cities are building. What of the leads you not to believe that?
Well, I recall your question to staff being our current state, not future state.
Counselor, can I ask how this relate? I mean, I know it relates to water rates, right? In the
Right.
long term. So how is that important right now, focusing on these rates because we're working on it simultaneously?
Right,
Taking the time to understand the plug and play.
because how much our plant costs us, whether we can build it for less, impacts directly to the CIP. So as we go into the CIP variance, you will see how it dramatically impacts the rates. Thank you.
So should the question then be, with the existing facilities that we have, do we have a plug and play model where we can just clunk down 102 foot by 344 foot building? And then that be the answer to our needs? Isn't that the question?
Well, my problem is the people that shared that information aren't sitting here tonight. And so we're here for the rates. I understand where you're coming from, Counselor Baker, but we could go around in circles and the person that answered those questions isn't sitting here tonight. So it's not fair to the people that are here to present this presentation, that they can't answer for that person.
Along those lines, I understand, and there does need to be trust for us to come up with a solution. And so I'm not saying that I necessarily see it the same way, but I understand your point of view. So I think moving forward with the people who are actually going to be part of this conversation, I guess maybe Councilor Baker could get those specifics answered. And if it's not clear exactly the way that you want it or that you're understanding, so that could be worked through with staff, I feel like. So I feel like it's out of the context of tonight, but I do think it's important for each council member to be comfortable if you have such questions as the modules, that we could figure out how that might fit in as we go through the potential designs other options that we look at when you bring in the other vendor.
That was more along the lines that I wanted to say.
And maybe I could add that from the staff perspective, a couple points, Councilor Baker's request for that information. We've done two things. I put stop work orders on all that design work at just under the 30% mark. And then at our last meeting of council, we talked about me having the direction to go ahead and retool an existing contract to investigate the assumptions at the Semper facility and the options there, and also investigate design solutions there. At this point, the way the Semper is designed, it's not plug and play at that location. That's what's made a direct or short answer to your questions challenging, Councillor, because we're trying to focus on the Semper alternatives, and we've set aside the 2025 plans entirely. Those have been mothballed for the last 2 months. So we're not working on those options anymore. We're looking at the Semper facility and focusing on that. And we don't have a plug and play scenario there at all. And so that's what we're looking at. And that work is now vigorously proceeding based on the last interaction that we had with City Council. So I think that's, building on and building towards tonight. We prepared tonight to provide you with some capital envelopes, both on the annual allowance side as well as on the water treatment facility rehabilitation or replacement side of the equation. And we can, Councillor, we can address or change any of those numbers based on comfort. We have a range of those from $100,000 to $200,000 in terms of allowances. And of course, we would never spend what we wouldn't need to. And we are heading into, guiding principles that's for us to be very thrifty. So one of our options is a belt tightening option on that, on whatever option we proceed with. We would tighten our belts on that and set a cap for how much we would spend, which would, I think, drive us into investigating plug and play options, for example, which would allow for some future proofing in that scenario. But we will bring all those options back to you to have a look at once we get the technical people doing that. If with that, I could segue into what we have ready for you tonight, and we can walk through that in the last series of interactions with City Council in different venues. We've really listened to requests for how to move forward and narrow in our work together on our rate scenarios for the future, immediate term, and for the future. And we've done that for you tonight. So we have now come back to you with 5 lettered options, A through E. The first option A is really the baseline. That's where we're at right now. So there, in effect, are 3 City Council driven options, B, C, and D. And our staff here tonight will walk through what those are for you. They're summarized at the top of the handout. But B and C are driven by Councillors Baker and Seymour, and some modifications that we've done to those together as we work through those. Option D folds in some inputs from other members of council that's primarily on the capital side of the equation in terms of the annual capital and the plant replacement capital. So those recap the council direction and discussion, and our staff will walk through the numbers for these. I'm just giving the overview. And then option E is something that staff has worked on to present to you, listening to all of the council input and considering all of the factors that staff would consider. We've presented an option E here, which we believe if you told us tonight to leave with option E, we would be able to assure you that that is an affordable option for us to move forward with. It provides rate relief across all rate-paying customers. It also provides a solid capital envelope, and it provides a belt-tightened amount for the replacement facility. The other thing that option does is it does leave us room on the general fund side of the equation for City Council to pursue other priorities. And so we've balanced out that part of the equation as well. And I think that will speak to the way that staff has approached all of these options is to bring debt in to make them work. We approach it from a how do you make it work perspective. So you won't see the debt line here be the same for every option. That's the variable, that one of them that we moved in order to produce a deliverable outcome for these rate scenarios. And so,
and before we move forward, would you explain that how long a period of time, when can council ever come back as we get some other things to be able to plug in and make different decisions? How's that going to work? I mean, I know people listening are wondering, is this for 2 years? Is this for eternity? Is it for just this year? What is it?
So City Council, of course, can set the water rates at any time in the process here. So one element moving forward together will be that we will provide regular updates on how we're doing. That will be very driven by the weather. A drought year, a wet year, an average year will drive our numbers. And so we will keep you apprised as the data comes in as to how we're performing against whatever scenario council instructs us to pursue. All of these models are built on starting to bring back in a cost escalator factor or percentage in 2023 and beyond. So whatever decision council makes tonight, or sorry, not tonight, but soon, if it is tonight or its next subsequent meeting, council could then leave it and monitor, because that would achieve a rate reduction across all tiers. And then we would monitor those revenues coming in. And if so directed, starting in 23, we would start to see those nominal increases built in to the rate structure. So lower them and then just have start with high level of predictability, bring back in an annual percentage increase, which is what we've talked about. Some of them range from 4%, and I think one of the models pushes that up into the 6% mark. That's not the one we'd be recommending, but hopefully that made sense.
Thanks.
Council could take one step and leave it for quite a while if they chose.
And for the record for people watching or just listening, would you let us know which staff is here for us tonight?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I'll introduce myself, Jody Andrews, Interim City Manager, joined by Chief Financial Officer, Deputy City Manager Larry Dorr, Deputy City Manager Barbara Opie, and Assistant City Manager Chris Lindsay, also heading up our General Services Department, joined by our two lead staff on the water rate modeling, Chris Gray and Brian Donahue, who've done all the modeling. Now, we don't have the interactive version because we've actually provided you tonight with printout readable versions.
Appreciate it.
Brian does have a real live model on his computer. So if you have any questions about these items, you wish to change an element of any one of these spreadsheets, we can do that real time for you and let you know how that changes what you're seeing on these spreadsheets.
Okay.
So having said that, if there are no other clarifying questions, I can turn it over to Chris Gray and she will walk us through the options A through E in more detail and probably easier to follow than what I just did.
I'm actually just going to give you a super high level. So Christine Gray, Business Operations Administrator for Public Works and Utilities. For the folks that are attending remotely, you have several pages. For the people here in the room, you've got hard copies. The top page is simply our cheat sheet. So it's all of the options rolled up onto one sheet. So this is designed to be the sheet from which we speak. The underlying sheets, the larger spreadsheets, are the detailed information that go behind it. So if we wanted to dig into some more information, we could do that there. But again, this top sheet that shows all the options is our cheat sheet summary sheet. As City Manager Andrews mentioned, we have 5 options for you tonight. So they represent a range of capital plans primarily, which is a driver for water rates and sewer rates. And then along the left-hand column, Brian will walk through the different variables and the different numbers that go into that. But ideally, we'll be looking at the top 5 options along with the bolded summary. So I'm going to turn it over to Brian to walk through each of those options. Again, as Interim City Manager Andrews mentioned, we can walk through anything if you want to talk through things. We'll just take notes on the side. Take it away, Brian.
Excellent. So what I'll just do is walk through each option. I'll tell you all the assumptions that were built into each scenario. And if you have any questions, please let me know. I'll start with option A. Option A eliminates tier 3 as an annual CIP of $24 million, $100 million built in for water plant work, and 4% annual rate increases starting in 2023. This is where we are right now as far as what's been adopted in 2022. You can see the associated rates within each tier. If you want to get into that kind of detail, we did expand tier 1 to 8 gallons in option B through E. But I'll start going down each really detail for each option. For option A, the projected annual rate revenue reduction is about $750,000. The projected ARPA / general fund use in this scenario is $0. The projected debt over a 10-year period is $71 million. The projected debt to CIP ratio is at 18%. Again, to remind you, 60% maximum per industry is best practice. Annual adjustments at 4%. So this 4% would be from 23 to 2040. We're financially stable for 10 years. And our shortfall begins in 2032. Any questions with option A?
Anyone online?
Well, Brian, when you're, I guess what I'll want to understand with all of these is when we talk about a shortfall, like what does that mean? Yeah, we go into red, but do we just take out more debt? Or what, like, what then?
It really speaks to how we balance the model. So in previous years of rate recommendations, we'd balance our models to year 2040. These models are now balanced to 2030. So it's really a 10-year horizon. But yes, we would handle the shortfalls in out years with some combination of debt and rate increase. And that's where you have a little bit of room because we have, with the 4%, we're really just talking about cost escalation, not really above and beyond a combination with debt to manage what our shortfalls are.
And if I can add on to that, Counselor, as we sit in front of council to talk about water rates and sewer rates going forward, this would be a moving 10-year picture. So yes, the existing 10-year picture shows that we balance, air quotes around balance. In 2032, we do not balance. So when we come to you again to talk about future years of rates, we would look at those out years and see what it takes to balance those out years based on what our expenses are, how much debt we can take on, and that City Council is comfortable with.
So in that regular reporting back on how we're doing, which I would hope we don't do once a year with you, City Council, that we would come back in with regular updates. How are our revenues tracking against the rate scenario that we have adopted? And then that 10-year balance shifts each year that we move forward together on this. Meaning that if we do what's projected, we'll still be balanced. If we do a little bit worse than we thought, then we have that discussion with City Council. If we're doing better than we thought, we also have that discussion with City Council at the time. And so there's always council will have the discretion as to what it does with rates moving forward. But the model now is based on a 10-year run, which you did hear on at our roundtable as from some of our industry peers as well. That's a consistent balance point. Okay.
Councilor Baker?
Yeah, I thought, and Rich, you joined me on this. I thought we were going to keep all the variables for A, B, and C the same. And I thought we were borrowing $100 million in each one of the scenarios. And we're using the ARPA funds in each one of the scenarios and the transfer from the general fund in each one of the scenarios. So the only differences were going to be the higher rates in A and the lower CIP projection in B. Did we really communicate?
So option A is status quo, where we are right now.
But it doesn't have the 33 million in ARPA funds.
I think that's going to be an option B.
Right.
So really option A was really the baseline. So
That's it.
But if we don't keep all the assumptions the same, how can it be a baseline?
Because this is where we are right now. We have not committed to borrowing any ARPA or general fund money for that.
But we were trying to compare between them, so we were trying to take out as many variables as possible. So the only variables we wanted was what the difference in rate and what the difference in CIP would yield.
So we could certainly.
Should we just go through the alternatives because we have them here?
Yes.
Instead of-
Maybe we could do that. We could hear Councilor Baker's concern on this point. The approach taken tonight it was really in the interest of time and trying to progress to a rate scenario that the council would want us to pursue. So what we tried to do, Councilor Baker and council, is to produce what's the best way we could make each of these scenarios work. And so with apologies, then we did adjust some of these factors to try and deliver the best model run for each of these scenarios where we balanced debt with what we brought in, because we also heard from council in the input is in that case, for example, on ARPA and general fund use, that maybe council didn't want to use all that room for this purpose, that they wanted to keep it potentially for other priorities in the budget. And so that's why you see, for example, in the option E, where we really tone that down. We could walk through these, Councillor, we could then real-time change any of these back to different settings and produce an output number that would align with that. I'll just recap it. We really wanted to present you with rate scenarios that we gave it the best shot to work moving forward, whichever one of those were, and we'll tell you which one we may not think we can get there on at all. And the others have different outcome scenarios. And one will actually tell you tonight that we we would actually be comfortable moving forward with this rate scenario, and would assure you that we would make it work. But
Yes. So I've got that one written down. We can peel that one off, do that one on the side. Okay.
So on to option B. This describes us as tiers 1 and tier 2 reduced and the fixed fee reduced. This considers a $12 million annual CIP, $100 million for water plant work, and 4% annual rates starting in 2023. In this scenario, the total projected annual revenue reduction would be $6 million. That would be $5 million within the tiers, and then an additional $1 million when we reduce the fixed fee to 10.05. In this scenario, we have $33 million built in for ARPA and general fund use. Our projected debt over a 10-year period is $22 million. The debt to CIP ratio is 8%. When we look at out years, it's really to be determined on how long we're financially stable, because we are so cash heavy with this scenario based on our current cash reserves and a minimum program of $12 million. So that would basically cut our 10-year average in half with this scenario.
So this one stands out from the others in that it has the lowest annual capital or CIP allowance and the lowest amount of the lowest amounts for the capital replacement for the treatment facility. So what Brian's described, that cash-rich environment comes from a much reduced capital program for the utility.
For the ARPA, is that based on the 10-year model? Is that 2020? Because I believe they expire in 2025.
We have it built in year 2022, this year,
Okay.
all at once.
So that's a one-time.
That's one, yep, one time.
Any questions from Councillor Nermella or Councillor Azadi?
On to option C.
But just a question on B. It shows us just borrowing 22 million in 2024. Even though, we have built into that one on option B, 100 million base for the water plant.
That's, that need is based on that 100 million.
Okay, with backfill on ARPA money and because we're still maintaining, that one too, that's one of our lowest CIP to debt ratios. And that was one thing that the leadership group on the water talked about, especially funding projects like that with generational equity over bonding that. So that's something.
Yeah, and again, 8% is really low. That maximum from industry best practice is 60%. So you could say we're under leverage there.
Okay, so we have room for leverage there.
40 to 60.
Absolutely. Yep, 40 to 60. Thank you.
Okay, so we can pop that in later.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
If there's no other questions, I'll move on to option C. Option C, tiers 1 and 2 are reduced. Fixed fee is reduced. Our annual CIP is at $24 million, $100 million for water plant work, and again, 4% annual rate starting in 2023. So the major difference here is that annual CIP. The ARPA contributions are the same. The debt over a 10-year period jumps to $153 million. And we're solvent through 2032.
Councilor Seymour, I think this is kind of what you're talking about.
Thank you. Yeah, when I proceeded one over, I went, okay, that's where the debt comes in. That
Right.
So that's kind of B kicked up.
You could do B1, B2, B3, B4.
But we funded it through.
Just did C.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, because that gets us out to 2032, gives us the rate that we're looking at. And then we spread out based on what we're believing too is borrowing 69 million up front to get the project moving, and then 30 every other year. Okay.
Where that comes from is 12 million a year in additional capital times 10 years is 120 million. And you can see that the total debt,
you know, right, goes up by 131 million because you're kind of financing debt service a little bit along the way. So we could, you know, do like a throttle in between, but I think you're caught on to it.
Okay, yeah. Thank you.
That's what I want.
If no other questions on option C, I'll proceed to option D. Option D is a reduction in all tiers. If you take a quick peek at the tiers there, what we tried to do is take a hybrid of 2019 rates. That's where you see the 357. The 652 is a greater reduction than a 2019 rate at 20%. So there's relief in all the tiers here without touching the fixed fee. There's a $30 million annual CIP built in to this scenario with $200 million for water plant work. This would result in a need for 6.5% rate increases, 23, 24, and 25. The total projected annual revenue reduction is 3.8 million. We're projecting ARPA and general fund use at 15 million. Projected debt over that 10-year period is 343 million. And that's really maximizing that 60% ratio. Number of years that the water utility is financially stable. We're stable to 2030, so that's 9 years. So shortfalls beginning in 2031. So really a maximized program versus a minimal program around 12 million per year in option D.
And the way that this gets to almost balance to 10 years is with higher annual rate increases. So instead of 4%, it goes above escalation to, in this model, 6.5%. So you get your much higher annual capital of 30 million. You get your much higher capital replacement for your water treatment facility, but you have to increase rates more, this is almost the Water 2025 model because it's putting money in there for that scale or caliber of replacement treatment facility and a capital sustainment program each year.
Any questions? Option E.
Okay. Option E, again, all tiers are reduced. We have a $24 million annual CIP. Instead of $100 or $200 million for a water plant, we have built in $150 million for a water plant. Rates are 4% starting in 2023. The revenue reduction in this scenario is about 3.8 million per year. The projected ARPA / general fund use is at 15 million. Projected debt over a 10-year period is at 254 million. The debt to CIP ratio is at 56%. And the number of years that the water utility is financially stable is a 10-year period through 2032.
Couple things on option E. One of the things that we had talked about, 4% being kind of that, what was the standard increase of the past. And I think if we asked last time, if you added 25%, I think it was something like 400,000 a year. Is that right?
That is correct.
If you did that, and I want to explain the spirit of my question. So we're kind of on a moving target as far as what the investment's going to cost because we don't know what the plant's going to be. What does that 400,000 allow us to do in debt over a 10-year period? Or is that easy to answer? That might not be easy, but I'm just curious. The reason I want to know is what kind of room does that potentially give us as we nail that down? Understanding we'd love it if you came back and said you could do 100 million and do, whatever the new option is, but I want to understand what kind of flexibility that gives us upwards with a smaller incremental increase over that time.
And absolutely. So if we punch in any number higher than 4%, that will significantly, potentially reduce the debt needed. And there's a compounding factor when you have a rate increase over time. So that also helps the utility as well. So if we do punch in 4.5, let's say for a period of time, we will have to issue less debt. And that's in any of these scenarios. So if we want a little bit higher of a rate increase, then our debt needs become less.
So I have two other quick things I want to hit on option E. I really appreciate all the work that you put into this. I think option E is a good in between. Not everybody gets what they want, but to me it seems workable. But I do have one big concern that I want to at least address. And I want to understand, does this give us room to still look at things like lot sizes? Because that compounding effect over the years is what I'm concerned about, especially with people with big lots. Understanding, as those go up, that's, potentially going to hurt people in the same way that we did 2 years ago or 4 years ago, or whatever it was now. So is that work going to continue?
So that is definitely something we can continue looking at if that's what council would like to do, is base what you pay on the size of your irrigable area or your lot. What we would probably do is start with you and say, these are the projects we need to fund. So here's the money we need to make to cover that. Then we would back into what does that look like? That takes a considerable amount of time to do. I think we talked about this a little bit last week. So we can certainly talk with you about when to implement something like that, but that's an option. A lot of different range cities are doing that now.
I would like it to be an and also that we continue to look at those paths. I mean, when I say and also, I also mean the other things like the education. And I mean, this has to be an all-in approach. I got an email from somebody who listened to our session on Thursday. And, they're on one side of it as far as conservancy is the most important thing to them. And to whatever extent we can address all those different areas, it makes sense because I think that it helps the whole picture. So I think we have room to give everybody a little bit of something, and not everybody's going to get exactly what they want and move forward. So the only other quick question, and this is kind of off topic, but I still am curious, because one of the things that struck me, and you get so tied up in portions of these kind of conversations, and in 18, I certainly was most tied up in what the actual rate was going to be. There were other significant changes in the way that we do water billing. If you go through the bill that was passed in 2018, and one of the ones I'm curious about, especially after the last couple of years, is one of the changes was that it was stricken from a $75 rebate when you look at people that get assistance, and it was set by city manager's designee. And the other change was that it went from the federal poverty level plus 10% to 60% of AMI. What I'm curious about is, what is that set? Is it set at 75 assistants or 100 assistants? And how are we deciding what level that's being set at?
So that currently is set at $180 per year. So folks get $15 a month. It is still set at 60% AMI for the qualifications, and it depends on the size of your family.
How has that been evaluated year to year? And what's the kind of the plan to evaluate that each year? How often are you evaluating that?
We've been looking at it in the years where we've had a rate increase. So as the rates increase, we look at what needs to, or what we could offer our customers who are struggling for a credit to their account. So in years where there's 0%, we've left it as it is. And then as far as the metrics for evaluating our affordability, we're also looking at a few different options that are out there, whether it's the EPA or an hourly rate, an hourly wage metric, to see where we are with affordability.
But that's done. So once you decide for the calendar year, say, then that is what it is. So you're not going like specific, case to case or anything like that. It's kind of like, here's our criteria, and this is what everybody will be judged on this
So that's for the bill credit. So if you meet the criteria for your annual income, you qualify for that one program. Then we have another program that's a hardship program, which is available to folks who are struggling, anybody. And it's a one-time thing where, oh my gosh, we had somebody lose a job and somebody's in the hospital. Can you help us out on our water bill? So that's the other major program that we offer. We have a few of them, but those are the two that speak more to situational and income qualifying levels.
Great. I guess one other thing that I'd be curious as we go down the path, depending on what we do with utility, you know, we set money aside for that property. So at some point, I imagine that gets infused back into what the structure looks like, or has that even been contemplated since we don't really know?
I mean, the water 2025 property?
Correct.
That's all in this.
Encapsulated.
There's no other money set aside right here.
So I guess then what is that? Well, I guess it doesn't really change anything, because if you're saying this is the level of investment, so say you went forward with that property, it would still be that belt tightening. Let's look at the design and figure out how we can make this happen for this money versus what we were looking at before.
Correct.
Okay.
May I also answer one of your earlier points when you talked about some of the feedback that you've been getting about the council discussions? And very early in February, we sent around a draft financial plan for ratepayers, and it included some of that. It included the framework for moving forward. And one of them was that council would consider this, directing staff to analyze options and prepare plans for an affordable replacement water treatment facility at either location that continues to provide safe, reliable, and affordable water to Westminster ratepayers now and into the future, that is supported by the following financial plan, which is what council is discussing tonight. The second element would be that council would consider directing staff to prepare an enhanced conservation plan for ratepayers that is based on information, education, and an expanded incentive program, including financial support to encourage reduced home and water business, and business water consumption to the benefit of ratepayers. And so there was that would be the framework, unless council directed, to modify that in some fashion, that we would bring back a modified rate schedule.
I appreciate that, both for us and for folks listening, because I think there's this misconception because we hit pause that we're just gonna, deal with what we have and not try to enhance, replace, or fix things that we need. But one thing you just said also lends one other question. What does this do to commercial rates? Are we not how do those fold into this? And what is the rate of increase we're looking on those?
So we haven't considered commercial or any other category other than single family at this point.
We haven't really heard any complaints, so
I think
we stick with.
Would be
commercial
yes.
as well. Yeah. So the projected annual adjustment beginning in 23, that does anticipate the 4s or the 6.5s for commercial as well.
My apologies. Yes.
I have a couple questions of Mayor Pro Tem. Okay. So I appreciate option E. Some questions around it. So if we get to a debt service and CIP ratio of 56%, are our hands tied at all in 10 years? Do we have, if our solution is go get more debt and we can only expand that by 4%, does that kind of hamper our ability to not be in the red in 10 years?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Yeah.
Can you repeat it, please?
Okay, if we're right up to the edge of the industry best practice of having 60% maximum debt to CIP ratio, right? Does that, if we're already there at that 10-year mark, are we at all constrained in what we can do 10 years from now in terms of resolving the fact that we're in the red?
So some things to consider are the fact that, one, we have existing debt service that we are obligated to pay, and that will drop off when those issues are completed. So we will have some room at that point. We are required to pay our principal and interest, as everybody is who takes out any kind of loan. So if we issue, the more debt we issue, the higher our debt service payments are. We've contemplated that in our financial models. So we are looking at that for every single year. I will say the more debt you issue, the more you have to pay back, and that could come into consideration in a future year.
Yeah, I would also just add that, we've, as Mr. Andrews put it, this is sort of like, and Mayor Pro Tem as well, this is kind of like the compromise. And it's an aggressive level of borrowing at an aggressive level of interest rate too, you should know. We forecasted in option E borrowings in 2025 and 2028 at current yields. You should know that. That's pretty aggressive, but it's, an illustration, and, we're obviously at very historic lows, but you need to know that going in, that we took away sort of pushing the envelope.
Yeah, I mean, we should be as realistic as possible regarding the potential for the Fed to start increasing, as they've just indicated. So, a second question. The $150 million water plant work that we're allotting, does that kind of preclude being able to do anything off-site, like get a new, to build a new water treatment plant or half of one, Denver Water had like big ideas and they went to a smaller facility. Is that even possible? Or is it too hard to answer?
Yeah, I can answer that. There will be a new decision branch or for City Council when we come back with the alternatives on the Semper water replacement facility or the rehabilitation. At that point is when we will present to City Council that information, and also in the context of moving forward on Water 2025, the current location. So Council will have two real choices on that decision tree to move forward with, either a version of a Semper alternative or a version of the Water 2025 alternative. It likely would, that Water 2025 offsite location alternative would likely look like it does at the 28% design level. Now we would evaluate the assumptions for that facility at that location, and then we would make it fit the belt-tightened budget if that was the scenario that we had. So hopefully that makes sense, that we would be reevaluating. One of the things built into the 2025 plan at that location was a significant amount of future-proofing. In other words, a second phase to the facility that was doubling of the capacity. That would be an assumption we would reevaluate, and that may drive a different set of design choices for the first phase, if there indeed is a second phase that we would even design for, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So the short answer would, we wouldn't let it rule out the Water 2025 other site alternatives. That would be a council decision when presented with information around those two choices.
Thank you. I do have a couple of other thoughts about getting into the lot size reconfiguration of rates, and I'm very concerned about that. I know, Christine, you said that some other cities are making that choice to do that. I'd be curious to know what headway they've been making in conserving their water consumption, if that is in fact the case. And then the other, what I would prefer is, if somebody is in fact suffering from a large lot size, that we could evaluate options like, is there some type of incentive offered to people on that level of, on that scale of lot where they, if they are conserving, they could save. And then at the other side of it, if they're having trouble conserving for a number of factors and they're, their income limited, then, providing the supports needed to, help people on the fixed incomes and on under the AMI level of 60%. So that's the approach I would prefer us to go versus like spending a lot of time looking into how do we address those large lots. I think we can do it in a top and bottom support way. And then finally, was this just broadly for this study session, were these options made available to the community? Was this?
I can answer that last question. We're bringing them in hard copy tonight, just given the fact that it was a long weekend. Yes, so just hard copy tonight. They are available or will be after tonight on our website.
Sure.
We'll put them up, but they were not pre-distributed. In fact, City Council just got them before the start of the meeting, but it's built on all of the input and direction that we've received. And we'll leave tonight with whatever direction Council provides us and get that material up as well. If I could say that on the lot size question, Council could direct staff to work on lot size based options, and that we could bring that work back in parallel with any other things that you direct us to do. It's just that we know no matter what we review on that matter, there's a timeline associated with that which does not match contemplated changes prior to the irrigation season this year. So we would run those in parallel, bring those back. Council could even help us scope that work. We could draft for that and bring it into a study session and talk about framing that up. So we make sure it heads in the right direction for Council to get an output that you want to see as options. So that would be my two comments, Councillor.
And for me, it's even if we have this year to look at it before we have to make decisions for the next year's. Thornton does it. I've talked to several people. They like it. As far as conservancy, I haven't talked to the city people to ask how they see the world. So.
Do you mind if I make a comment on that? I know that you're next, so if you don't mind, because it's directly to the points that we just heard. I'm all for trying to figure out if people, are at hard times, but we need to have some real thought, in my opinion, to the fact that some people purchase their homes with the lots they have, with grass they have, because that's what made sense for them and their family. And so I don't want to always just say the answer is that resident needs to change. If they're doing reasonable things to take care of a property that 10 years ago, 20 years ago, they bought, worked their life for, and decided to landscape it a certain way because that's what the city went to, I don't think it's fair to change the rules on them. So this is another one of those yes, but. So I am definitely in favor of looking at the lot sizes because I think it makes sense where and it's not saying that you don't want conservancy in Thornton. There is still a punitive place where you reach that says this is unreasonable amount of water that you're using. So I think we're all on the same page as far as we don't want people to waste water. But I do think it would be amiss to realize that some people put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into deciding that that's the home they wanted and that's the way they wanted it to look and that's why they purchased it.
Mr. Seymour?
Thank you, Mayor. Couple questions, and I don't know if we discussed this, whether we were going to apply the 4% to the utility fee also on the fixed fee, recognizing that, those costs come up over time and that we're using that for, streets also now. So I don't know if we built that into the model too, because that would be a reasonable and such. I know that's a really minor lift on that one. But, over time, over 10 years, compounding that 4% will help that fix parts too. So I think that's a reasonable consideration looking forward.
Can I clarify that the fee we're talking about here, the fixed fee, has nothing to do with streets?
Oh, that's not the.
That was not the roadway fee. This is the infrastructure fee.
Yeah, because we renamed it.
Different fee.
Okay.
Yep.
Gotcha. Okay.
Sorry.
Then infrastructure fee on
Yes.
here. Okay. My apologies. Yeah, I crossed two of them up. Because I think even doing a 4% on that is reasonable expectation because those fixed costs do go up also. Just plugging that in. And I appreciate on option C, that look that we put at it is that we still have 100 million in there for the plant. I appreciate the fact too, that from a debt standpoint, we're at 38%, not pushing that maximum. So we're borrowing money. We're using generational equity to build the plants and those type of infrastructure. And then we still have some wiggle room on the CIP. I would like for my own edification too, if we could pump out level C and then use that 12 million CIP so I can compare those, but keep the borrowing similar. I understand why we did or not, but I just would like to see that myself. So option C at 12 million CIP. But I very much appreciate C because we're borrowing for the things that we need long-term. And then we're not pushing the envelope because, at B, 8%, we're under leveraged, obviously. So did that ask make sense?
Counselor, so option B is 12 million.
But it doesn't have the 100 million borrowing.
Yeah, we didn't leverage, we're not leveraging there though. We're only leveraging 8% on B.
So only $22 million is being borrowed.
Yeah,
And
on
so
B,
you- So you're wanting to see 12 million with 153 million leverage?
yes. Just to change, so I can just change one input. I know it doesn't make sense on the borrowing. But-
And in that option, we're so cash heavy,
Mhm.
we really don't need to
Don't
borrow.
need to borrow?
We don't need to borrow that level.
Okay,
And really that's how the model balance.
okay, I'll give that some more thought on how I manage that spread then.
But yeah, that option B was trying to get at that $12 million CIP question.
Okay. It's just what's nice about option C, and I know we have the council has the budgetary say to come back on that and say, okay, here's the constraints we want to put on that. But the fact that, that healthy is to 2032. So, and it gives the rates that we're looking at too for our residents. So
Did you not want a different tier 3 then? You just want tier 1 and tier 2?
Just for now.
Why would we go back? Why would we okay, no one was complaining in 2018 when we had 3 tiers and it was, $8, close to $8 or what have you. So why would we go below that?
I would argue that people were complaining. Matter of fact, I ran against the water rate increases of 15 and 16 and was elected on the fact that I was disappointed with those rates. So the rates that we did in 18 made the ones that I was complaining about pale in comparison. Those were something like 6 or 7%. I actually have a picture of the flyer that came in my bill those years on my phone. I was just looking at it before because I was trying to remember what the rates were. So I would argue that there were some people that were starting to have concerns about it. However, I don't know about not having a tier 3, but.
Councilor Emmons?
Thank you. So one of my questions was, what did we define the utility infrastructure fee to? Because I know that we changed that. So does that go, can you define that for me?
The infrastructure fee?
Yeah.
So that's for fixed costs, sort of like the readiness to serve parts of the utility.
Okay.
And
So
then
not necessarily CIP projects or credit?
but it can. The roadway fee is the one that now applies just to streets. So infrastructure roadway.
Hence the name change that you all.
Yeah,
approved.
yeah.
Just for clarity for Councilor Emmons, can you list some of the other things that we typically pay for in that fixed revenue stream? But just examples of.
Oh, absolutely. The meter shop, meter expenses, utility billing expenses. Those are the two that come to mind right away.
Software systems.
Thank you.
And then the CIP, does that, for what we have already committed to, because I know last time we were in here, it had a list of projects that we were looking at. I couldn't recall if we were committed to them or not. And if so, is that adjusted in those fees that we're currently working on?
So the 2023 projects we are not committed to
Okay,
because we haven't adopted that budget yet.
okay.
Except the only thing I would say is that Lowell Boulevard continuation of that project, that water line replacement, we started that funding this year. So if we were to stop that,
Okay, that's what was
impacted.
because I knew
Yep.
that at one point, I believe that we approved it to move forward, but I couldn't believe it. I couldn't understand if that was one of all or just the one. Okay, so that makes sense. And then from your perspective, from staff perspective, what out of these 5 options, obviously these 5 options could work for us, we wouldn't have presented them, right? What would be the thought from staff as far as the one option that you would suggest?
so I would say that knowing we're not going to get the results of this evaluation for the water treatment plant for a few months, we had been talking about $100 million towards that solution, whatever it is. I'm not in the engineering group, but working with the engineers, we know what things cost. And so it makes me personally more comfortable to have $150 million towards a water treatment solution. Mind you, we'll get that information probably sometime in June or early July. So that's when we'll have that clarification. So that's one piece that I'm comfortable with. I also would prefer to keep a $24 million CIP annually. We have a lot of work to do. In my opinion, 12 million doesn't quite cover that. 24 million is the average of what we've been budgeting over the last 10 years. So it seems like a reasonable number going forward.
And do we have an estimated guesstimate on how much in dollars have we deferred with Semper in preparation for 2025?
So we have a $15 million project that has been deferred for several years because we were on a path. So if we're not pursuing the Water 2025 solution, which we've been calling it, then that comes right back into the CIP in years 23 through 25, I believe. That's at least one example. I don't know all of the other ones off the top of my head.
And Councilor Emmons, may I add on that one that we will have the design team over the next 4 months review that as well, that parked $15 million project, to see whether in any scenario we would need to revive that and bring it back forward again, or whether that gets shelved in light of another way to overhaul and rehabilitate, replace Semper. So we'd throw that back in the evaluation mix, that project.
And then and this is just from a purely financial point. I mean, in order to do a cost of business, there sometimes requires debt as far as providing a service. But there also is a balance to that. So having $254 million in debt over a 10-year period, I mean, what is the best balance, I guess, would be between the debt over 10 years? Because I'm actually surprised that having 2 tiers at a lower rate would cost the debt of 22 million versus 254 million. So that is interesting to me on those numbers. But you're saying that you would want to go with option E or best practice? Again, I mean, how does that look?
50 million more on that. For that
Oh,
to
I
teach that, yeah, that's where the difference is right there.
Okay.
Yeah, if I may.
And then 60%, I know that that's industry practice, but that seems tight on what we would want.
So I'm speaking from the utility perspective. I would ask Mr. Dorr to speak maybe from the Treasury and Finance perspective.
Yeah, I would say 40 to 60% is kind of that industry guidepost. I'll just connect into what Mr. Andrews said a few minutes ago. You know, we would, as I had said a minute ago, that $254 million in debt is also modeled at pretty aggressive low interest rates, but we would continue to update every quarter multiple times a year, favorable and unfavorable changes in conditions, in the markets, in the cost of construction. Of course, in 4 months, we'll have an idea of this concept of Semper replacement, et cetera. So it will be an ever-changing environment, and it has been. It has been as input costs change. We also have forecasts for a lot of different increasing costs, wages, things like that. And we would just continue to refine and refine all the time as our teams are doing in the financial models and in using capital market inputs for inflation and cost of debt and risk tolerance, et cetera. So, but I'll say E is that mix that hopefully strikes a balance for the residents of some aggressive capital planning, some rate reductions, some borrowings at, some high levels and utilization of outside funds like general fund and such like that, which we haven't done before. So it's really everything's on the table, find a way to get this done and continue to adjust as we go forward.
If I could also add on that point, because I've heard it a couple of times now, concerned about that CIP ratio. So I would add two things. One, Chris mentioned earlier, every year we're going to be paying down debt, right? So that begins to decrease every year. I think the other bigger point is that this isn't a normal year that we're talking. This isn't a normal project balance that we're talking about. We're talking about the biggest capital project in the city's history. So going up against that industry best practice is not unusual, not out of the realm of what should be considered normal. This is a debt need, certainly a debt need for a one-time capital project that's really enormous and outside the realm of what we would normally do in a capital plan.
Yeah, well, first of all, thanks for the plan. You really didn't have to do D and E because we didn't ask for D and E. And I'm disappointed that all the assumptions weren't the same, because I have to agree that borrowing money now is a better choice. I would suggest we borrow the whole $100 million very soon, because I don't think interest rates are going to go anything but up. It doesn't take much calculation to see what the profound impact of higher interest rates are. So I think that's really something we should seriously consider. In both C and D, they had the rates as we have proposed for the ordinance for next Monday. The 1B, because and this is the impact of CIP. This is the impact of prudent spending for capital costs. This is why it's so important that we find the best dollar solution to like our water treatment plant. Because the difference between those is only $12 million. And in the B, it's good forever. It meets Councilor really Nurmela's 100 years. We're cash plus, right? Isn't that the way you described it? Cash
I don't
flush.
get how this meets. I would never go with option B as being what meets my desire.
I think that as a city, we have done some wasteful spending. You already know my views on the biosolids treatment plant. I think the water meter replacement to really replace 31,000 water meters all at one time, I think that was a foolish error. I think we should have stayed with our original plan. I would take a much more conservative approach to a lot of things we do. I would try to get more time out of all of the infrastructure we have. I mean, there is an advantage to replacing some on schedule, but there's also an advantage to running others until they fail, if it's going to be a small failure. Okay, we can't afford major failures, and nobody says that. but in both B and C. And C is the one where we assume 24 million in CIP every year. And yet it's still good for 10 years. We're making a water rate for this year, for 2022. We wanted to put lot size in, but we got the legal question mark on that, which still hasn't been answered, by the way, even though an answer was promised for the next day.
Sir, Counselor, we did say that there is a workaround to create categories of lot sizes as a way to address the legal issues.
I had talked with our really deputy city attorney, and she said she'd get back to me the next day. We crossed paths or something happened, and I never got the information. Okay. So we're making it for 1 year. We have a lot of unknowns. In all of our conversations, we said that the price difference between a lot-based penalty term and just tier 2 and 3 the same would affect very, very few people, correct, Ms. Gray?
We said that very few people would get into tier 3.
Would
based
get
on
into
3
tier
times
3.
their lot size.
If it was lot-based, very few, at 3 times the lot size, very few people would. So there could be a cost there, okay? But it's sort of a compromise between trying to get a whole bunch of work, which I mean, the logistically can't be done in the time frame we have to talk about, or just accepting that there are going to be a few people. Right now, the current top for tier 2, as we saw in our water charts, there probably are, well, we know there are a quarter of the people throughout the city that exceed that. 1 in 4 people, 1 in 4 customers of ours exceed that. So it is a penalty for just having a large lot, okay? And a large lot, remember, 20,000 gallons is going to have a hard time taking care of a 7,000 square foot lot. And we have a lot of lots that are larger than 7,000 square feet. And I'm even taking in that one for the footprint of the house and driveways and stuff like that. So really, I think B and C are such desirable things for this year. And the risk for the out years, well, for B is 0 risk. For C, they match everyone else. So, I mean, the power of B and C, I think, is just tremendous. And we'll watch this year. And if we find people who are abusing our water, because I absolutely agree with everyone on this council, that we will not tolerate waste of water. We will not tolerate water being used and wasted. And this will certainly put it to the test. And I have great confidence in the people of Westminster that they share our feelings on how precious and valuable water is. So I think on the 28th, we should go to the ordinance to set the new water rates at the rates that are in both B and C. Thanks.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yeah, I have you on the list for next, Obi.
Oh, great. Thank you, Mayor. Just wanted to say a few words. So,
Just a
Councilor
second.
Baker,
I have Mayor Pro Tem first. Then you're after
Oh.
him.
sorry.
Just a couple things. First, quick question. So just to make sure I'm on the right page. Currently, tier 2 and 3 are both 815.
Yes.
So this was part of my confusion about B and C is I did not think that we wanted to further lower tier 3. I understood we wanted to hit tier 2, and that was my assumption of what we were going to go after. One thing that I'm open to debate about is I would like to see us come up with a water solution for the treatment plant at $100 million. However, I understand wanting some room as we try to figure out what that solution is. I'm trying to understand how we have a balance between that. One thing I don't see in any of these options is something that has that tier 3 still set at 815, and then have more along the lines of the rates that you guys propose for 1 and 2 with the 100 million versus this 150 million. So I don't know what that would look like, and how do you, because even if we went with option E, we're not absolutely saying we're going to do $150 million. We're saying this gives us the ability to do $150 million, correct? Because, and I think the reason that's important is I think that it's imperative that this council sets an expectation to say, we'd like you to get as close to 100 million as possible, but we understand there's some unknowns that we just don't know. And I guess that's why I'm a little more comfortable with something like E, with some flexibility to say, you know, we just don't know those pieces of it. Not really an answer or direction, but just what's going through my head, and happy to get feedback from any of my colleagues on, you know, what you think about those points. Specifically, just being able to have that flexibility. And I've been very forthright that I think that we need a tier 3. And I certainly I guess I would just reiterate my starting point of, I didn't think that we were gonna change tier 3 also. I knew we wanted to change tier 1 and 2.
Councilor Izadi?
Yes, so just wanted to, so I agree with Mayor Protem. The tier 3 change is different. I did not expect that as well. I think we don't need to reduce them again. They already have a reduction. To Councilor Baker's point, we did ask for option D and E. That was part of the ask. And I think you had mentioned earlier too that tier 1 the option A being the baseline. Yeah, that's what staff has produced, was exactly what we asked for, right? We said as is today. There wasn't any assumption of various things to be changed there. That's how it works today. And I actually like option E for the same reasons of we need some flexibility since we don't know how much the plant will cost. I think artificially starting from a lower capital total is not in our best interests. So 150 is a good compromise for now, you know, without knowing what it'll cost. And it doesn't mean that we're going to spend the whole 150. So I agree with that it's probably the best option for now. Let's see what the capital costs come in at when the evaluation is over.
Councilor Numella?
Sorry. Yes, I also agree option E seems to give us the best runway for having some options on how to resolve the water treatment facility. I also appreciate the fact that we're not pulling that it does reduce the amount of dollars that we're pulling from our general fund and ARPA funds. I'm more sensitive to the general fund being broken into, at the rate of whatever it is, $30 million, because there are other priorities like road improvements and things like that will go to the wayside as a result. So yeah, that's where I'm at. I think, yeah, I'll stop there. I could go on for many, many hours.
Mela, I didn't hear if you said an option or not.
I said option E.
Thank you. Sorry about that. Councilor Baker?
Yeah, like if I can respond to the Mayor Pro Tem's question, with a question, why do we have tier 3? I thought it was a penalty tier. That was the purpose of it, was to make people remember water is a valuable resource, and if they're using more than your share, similar to what we do with businesses. If businesses go into stage 2, they're using more than their meter size allocates for that business. And there might be some other criteria on how many gallons you get on one of the commercial meters? Or is it strictly the size?
It's not based on meter, it's on what they bought access to.
What they bought access to, but I mean, that meter's mostly sized to how much water they're going to demand, right?
It's not,
Their tap.
it's not, yeah, it's not based on the meter, it's based on how much water they bought access to. So they're
Yeah.
tapped. So meters out of the picture. You have an office building, it's little, you have a.
But
How
I
much you
mean,
have
but I
more?
mean, bigger taps need bigger meters, right?
Yes.
Okay.
You are correct. And I guess that's where we're in this weird rub, because I do think that we need that line that says this. This is a more reasonable line, more in line with what we've seen in the past, probably still, there's been how many years since they put that 2016 in, right? So we're 6 years past that. So if I think about, like, if they would have done it a 4% increase from where we were in 2014, you'd probably be somewhere closer to what we have on this. What I am surprised by, and what is unfortunate, although I think it's the right path, I think the right path is we need to look at lot size, right sizing that top tier for lot size. What I was figuring we would see here is an increased size in that tier 3. What I would have liked to see is this number at tier 3 and then increase 10,000 gallons in tier 3, or something that made sense, that still had a reasonable line where we're saying we're encouraging people to be reasonable with their water use, but something that both give us relief on the price, but also gives some elasticity in the size like we've done in tier 1.
Counselor Emmons, I didn't write down if you said what you're looking for. If you're there.
I'm not quite there, but I know I need to make it a decision. Here are my thought processes towards each one. Is that I originally, first looking at this, because we just got this tonight, and first looking at this, it makes sense to go with option E, because just doing quick math on the information for the last 10 years on water rates, if we looked at the last 10 years of water rates, it was, we had increases of 4% and 8% over those years. And it does equate to roughly these numbers and these tiers. They're not that far off. So if you were steadily increasing from 2013 to now, we'd be roughly at these numbers, which makes sense. I'm a little hesitant to accept a debt of $254 million over 10 years. Now, understanding there could be 1,000 variables between now and 10 years from now. So that's not necessarily a concrete objective number to really focus on. But then looking at option B and C, I really don't think that we should go away from 3 tiers, because from my understanding, I'm looking at the history of our rates, we've been at a 3-tier system for a very long time, or at least the 10 years that I've pulled up within the city, we've been 3 tiers. And I think that that 3rd tier does have a level of a stopgap for using water. And so I think, but looking at this, I was very surprised to see our TED not be as much as it would. Now, obviously, it's not apples to apples. So you can't necessarily look at it that way. But I think with not understanding where we're going to be in 4 months, or have that information right now, I feel more comfortable looking at option E as the go-to, as the buffer point for understanding that we're going to have a major investment within our city, whether that's repair and replace or something entirely different. So I think option E sounds the most weighted, but it's not option B and C are a close second. I mean, they're drastically different, but there's some benefit in looking at those. So option E.
Councilor Seymour?
I think I mentioned this. I'm pretty happy with option C. I understand my colleagues' concern on having a third tier. I think we can get there with staff's help. They're very, looking at lot sizes, I think will be important. It'll give us a balance on usage, over usage, and then, but right now we're just not there yet, and so that's why looking at option C and leveraging more debt but not maxing it out.
Councilor Baker?
And if I can add some information, okay? When we reduced tier 3 from 1288 to 815, staff estimated that the cost of that would be about $750,000, right? Okay. If we reduce it from 815 to 554, that's like $2.50. So a little more than half of the first reduction, which means that in all likelihood, to reduce it for these quarter of the people that use it, it would cost us about $400,000 more. That's all the money it would cost. Is there any way that you can help us out on that, Brian or Christine or Ms. Gray, or could you tell us how much, if we made 2, tier and 3 the same on option C, would that cost the city? And they can be ballpark figures, I don't know.
So tiers 2 and 3 are the same dollar amount right now in B and C. Please clarify. In A.
In A.
Okay.
Okay, reducing it from 1288 to 815 is a reduction of $4.73.
Right.
And we figured it cost the system $750,000. So if we reduced it $2.50 more, approximately how much more would it cost the system?
So if tier 2 is 815 minus 250. If tier 2 is $8.15 minus that $2.50 you're talking about. Okay.
Or 260.
We have that pulled up. Okay.
Yeah, so if I look at tier 2 at 554, minus 32%, that's 3.9 million. Tier 3 at 554, again, minus 32%, 1.4 million for a total of about 5 million. And then the additional minus 23% to the infrastructure fee, that becomes 6 million.
Right? But
Okay, so from no, I got it.
Yeah.
So we're looking at 2, just because the gallons don't change, even though the dollar amounts do, on taking tier 3 from 1288 to 554, it's approximately 1.5 million. Okay.
So none of these take 1288 into consideration because 1288 is not a number anymore for us.
Right, but we're trying to figure the difference more, taking it down to 554.
Okay.
How much more than the 750,000?
Okay, I can give you that.
For option A.
Well, just we're trying to figure out, on that third tier, where our loss of lift, I guess is a backwards way to put it, is that because we knew for a fact from 1288 to 815 lost 750. So from 815 to 554.
Right. Okay.
What that
It's
Gotcha.
about 1.5 million, so the delta.
total.
But I'm not gonna look at that. I mean, for me, that's not the same though, because we've also reduced tier 2, which is substantial.
Right.
In the overall scheme of it. So, and I mean, I guess the part that I'm hoping still changes is the debt, and that we're not gonna have to do 150. I mean, we just don't know that tonight. It's just that gives us that ability. Could you tell me, and maybe you can't tell me this, but it'd be interesting to know, how many, if you increase the size of, what does that change? Like, how many people does that impact? Like, if you went, what would be a impactful number to try to help more in that topic?
Going on yours, if you increased tier 2 a bit, because so that tier 3 comes in at a.
Yeah, that's what I meant.
That's what you meant is
Yeah,
increase
tier
2.
So you go tier 2 to 30,000 or 40,000.
Well, you'd have to go to at least 40,000 because 40,000 is what a third of an acre would take.
Okay,
There's
go
a
to
lot of-
40,000. In the interest of trying to get everybody on board with the same option, if you went to 40,000 gallons in tier 2, what does that do to us?
I think that's going to take a little more time to understand gallonage for consumption and revenue. That's like 3 variables. Am I right on that?
That's correct.
Yeah, we don't have a database of our gallonage consumption in tier 3 tonight that we could just refer to.
I'll put it across to you this way, though. If the choice of getting everybody on board with something like B and C versus E with the increased tier 3, I mean, to me, it still seems like everybody's still thinking what they want, but it's probably a better overall equation for the system. Understanding there's how many people are going to hit into those tiers. I mean, well, none of them are going to hit into that tier if you don't have it. So I guess that's my point. And I certainly would like to have all 7 of us on board with something that you all are also on board with. Maybe we can't get there and I'm too much of a dreamer, but I feel like this is close. And I feel like the sticking point is if we would have been able to have the time to look at the lot sizes and accommodate for it, which we're going to still do. But if you just do that for this year with understanding we're going to right size those top tiers, maybe we have something that everybody can work with.
What I hear that we're going to change the gallons for the tiers and that we're going to change lot size, that's going to blow any of this out of the water. So we can certainly make a decision tonight based on the structure that we have, but know that like next year, whenever we're looking at this new configuration or applying it, we're back to red like tomorrow. So, I mean, I'm having a hard time. Like,
I don't know what you're basing that. Tier 3 before wasn't even $1 million in revenue. Then why do you think that trying to accommodate for people who ended up in tier 3 because they have big lots that they bought 20 years ago blows us totally out of the water? It didn't blow us totally out of the water when we changed it a couple months ago.
I'm talking more about the lot size as having a big difference. I don't know what the change in the gallon structure is going to do, but I can tell you it's going to move us closer to red. Even if it's only by $1 million, it's still closer to red. We're talking about having like individual responsibility, but we're subsidizing the bejesus out of our water for a choice that somebody made yesterday or 20 years ago on buying a large lot. So I just want to point that out, whether it's worth anything.
I adamantly disagree with you that you're subsidizing anything for something somebody's buying. We're setting what we consider a fair price for something. That's not subsidizing. Subsidizing is something costs $5 and I'm going to give you 2 of those dollars.
But the cost of our water, we've already been told, is already 30% below at the time that the rates were in 2018 or whatever that, or was it 2015? I can't remember when we had that study come out. We're already below the cost of our water in terms of the revenues.
We have to take care of it though. That's all based on investment.
Let's keep talking.
Anyway.
Right now we have Obi. We have Councilor Izadi, Mayor Pro Tem. We have Councilor Nurmela. We have Councilor Emmons for option E. I haven't spoken. I've just been listening, and my sticking point was, then why have 3 tiers? If you're going to have 2 and 3 combined, you don't have 3 tiers. And I do like E because do have too many variables. If we all had a crystal ball sitting here tonight, we wouldn't have been here all night. We don't. And we're making the best. We're going to come back to this. I don't know how Thornton does it, and I don't know what their water stuff is. What I do know is we still have a lot of work to do to educate people for these big lots. How much should they be watering? Should they be using 40,000, 90,000, whatever those numbers are? Is that enough? Is that not enough? Is that too much? Is there something in between? And how can we help them if they want to keep that lot size and beautiful? How can they do it? I'm not here to tell them they have to rip it out and do whatever. I'm here to help them live the way they choose to live, but not be bankrupt at the same time. And in talking to some of these people, they are trying to be conserving. And so if there's other ways they can look at it, we have to help everyone. And we want to talk about having pots of money for everything. I think we've got 5 pots of how people can pay for their water bill because of what we have today. And if that isn't a handout and whatever, I don't know what is. So we could go round and round, but staff, you have 5 people saying option E to go forward with for Monday night. Yep.
Can we, if we're moving forward with option E, can we have the 33 million, none of the 15 million for ARPA? Or no? I'm just,
To clarify the question, to increase the ARPA general fund use from 15 to 33 million?
yeah, because we have 33 listed in option B and C. If we're not going that route, can that be in E?
Thank you. The reason that we dropped that was based on other council feedback earlier sessions to leave room for other priorities for city council without money.
Okay.
So we reduced it here so that you would have more to spend, more room to prioritize that money, which we haven't gotten to yet with you in other sessions for different reasons.
And then the ARPA, do we know how much of the 15 is ARPA versus general fund?
We did, I think we've worked that up roughly. We are,
I don't know that we've worked that out. I would probably break it up as 5 million being from ARPA and 10 million being from general fund carryover. But I think within that, I'm fairly flexible.
If I could add, I think Councilor Emmons, you'll, as a city council, will be taking that action in its budget process. This is about water rates, but that ARPA general fund will come in the summer with your budget process, so that decision could be addressed at that time.
Thank you.
What does, oh, I'm sorry, Mayor Pro Tem, you had something.
I was just curious, the concept of increasing tier 2, if that's something that we could even get back before. I mean, I know we want to vote on this the next meeting, but is that something that you could look at and see, is that feasible for you to increase that and not substantially blow this model out of the water?
so Mayor Pro Tem, we ran that just off to the side here in respect of your question earlier. You know, if we looked at a lift of perhaps 5,000 kilogallons, 5 to 10,000 gallons on that tier 2 under option E, we would probably shift our numbers up to $300,000 more. That's about what that would equate to. We would effectively knock most people out of tier 3. So we, you know, to run the numbers, we just zeroed that down, even though we would still have a tier 3 rate. We probably wouldn't see many users except for the couple that the mayor described in the 40 to 90,000 range. But it would extend tier 2. So if council directed us, we could modify that bracket tonight and run those numbers with confidence. Our interval would be on the numbers that you have before you, about $250,000 probably difference, which we would absorb through a change in the debt calculation. But the debt calculation here, the projected debt over 10 years is 254 million. So we could make that number work if council so directed us tonight in order to keep you on your timeline. You wanted to review something on Monday night coming.
I'm still good with E, but I would be open to that and actually favorable to that if 3 other people said yes, because the whole point to Councilor Baker's question earlier, which is a fair question, is what is the point of E? And the point of E is to keep people from misusing water. And so to me, what we have seen in the past is people who weren't really misusing, that were just trying to take care of their lawns hurt. So to me, that is to that end, and it would be a good in between. But if 3 other people don't agree, then
Yeah, that would be enough for most people. But I don't know.
So essentially,
better than where it is.
Yeah, that's true.
We do know that this is going to lower the water rate for the small users $1, right? That's all they get is $1 a month.
how do you figure?
Well, because you've lowered the water rate 50 cents 1,000, and there's a 2,000 gallon minimum. So 2,000 to 50 cents is $1. So someone with a minimum water bill of $48 a month is now going to pay 47.
$1 is $1.
And I guess too, looking at, because I would appreciate the 40,000 gallons. And then even with that, and I understand my colleague's thought on the 3rd tier is I guess on the bright side of that though is we've looked at taking tier 3 from 1288 even down to this E proposal of 815 is a 36% rate decrease.
I think my biggest objection to it is you're really supposing everyone who uses above this number is wasting water. And even though by raising it to 40,000 gallons, we're probably cutting that down to literally what, 1,500 people in the city? That's a pretty creepy way to tar people who, in all likelihood, are not doing that.
I understand your point of view, but what I would ask you and the folks who feel that way to think about is there's clear direction that we want to look at lot size. And we don't know what we don't know. And there's no way for me to guess that. And we have to the mayor's point, we have to do something. And this is good. Not everybody gets everything. So I am not asserting anybody is doing anything. I'm saying that there are people who do misuse. I'm not saying which people, but I'm saying I want to make sure that doesn't happen.
People water
Yeah,
2 o'clock in the afternoon.
100%. So this is a good in between, and it moves the needle. And I think because I do have a problem with the rates. And so my biggest problem with E is, even though I think it's better than the others, is that I think that second tier needs to be bigger until we address lot size. But I'm still willing to go with it. So in the effort to get everybody moving that direction, I think that's a good in between, is to say, let's increase that 10,000 gallons on the second tier and
10 or 20.
I'd say 10. I think that sounds like what they crunched the numbers. So go up to 40,000, right? Or no, that would be 30. That's what you said, right? The number you gave.
Who else wants to weigh in?
I don't think we should change the gallon amount. We don't know how many people it will impact. We don't know the impact to conservation. And I would just ask that as we're looking at lot size calibration for structure, that if we're comparing to other cities, that I would like to see other cities who are doing this, what their water use per capita is in relation to our current water use per capita. Show me it works in terms of not being wasteful.
I think the key is 40,000, not 30. So that second.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm a little confused. Are we not doing option E?
The question.
Didn't we have
The question came up in the discussion because of tier 3 starting at or just being anything over 21,000 1,000 gallons. And it just was asked from different conversations that have been had if that should go up. And I think staff just ran it at 30,000.
We took it all the way up to the maximum loss of tier 3 customers. Clearly enough. So when we ran that, it was approximately 300. That gallon supply that no one really have that $300,000 loss, which is why I cited 200 to 250 if you set it down more towards the 30,000 gallon. But so between 30 and 40,000 change in this limit, you're looking at between $200,000 and $300,000 loss probably.
It would max out at that point anyway. Okay.
You're close to maxing out. You're not going to have a lot of tier 3 customers at higher.
Did you hear all of that, Opie?
Yes.
And the reason I brought that up, and I think maybe Mayor Pro Tem's, I don't speak for my colleagues, but it would be, well, nobody gets everything they want. Is that how can we get to where we come out with as many council on board with this as possible? It'd be good for our community. But, that's part of the negotiation. That's why we've been doing this too. So that while not optimum, what can we deliver the greatest impact for our residents? And that impact is financial and also from a community standpoint of we are taking good care of our system and we are being good stewards. So that was my intention to have that discussion.
So let me do a quick poll on just E as it sits and E with an increase for how would that work? Tier 2. Tier 2 would increase, so tier 3 would increase or would start at a
Higher number. Do that backwards.
Do it backwards?
Yeah,
Start with that one first?
That's 31st.
Okay, so help me, it's 30,000 we'd start at? Gallons?
I thought it was 40.
Sounds like it doesn't make a
It
difference.
doesn't matter.
Then do 40.
So you want to start at 40,000?
So basically, tier 1 would be 1 to 8,000 gallons at 357. Tier 2 would be 9 to 40,000 gallons at 562, and tier 3 would be all gallons above 41,000.
Okay, so I'm just going to run down the list and tell me yay or nay. Baker?
I'll go with our really compromise of the 40,000.
Councilor Seymour?
Same.
Councilor,
Same.
Lemons?
I saw a sign today that had a sign for something lemons. It was L Lemons, and I'm going, oh.
Mayor, may I interrupt for just a second?
Oh,
Staff are trying to clarify what Councilor Baker put forward. The tier 3 rate would kick in at 41,000 and above, and that would be the 815 that's in option E. Correct. Thank you. Sorry.
So I think he said 562, and I think I meant
652.
652.
Yeah,
The numbers around that.
That I heard, okay.
Mayor Pro Tem,
Yes.
did he give me a thumb?
Yeah.
Better than something else. Councilor Azadi,
And this is for option E, 40,000 tier 3?
yes.
No, I'd like the original tier E.
Okay.
Option E.
Councilor Namella,
I bet you can all guess where I'm at. But option E as it was.
okay, so either way, we were 5-2, so.
Compromise didn't win much.
You do have 5
For the 40, what do you guys want to do?
And it's for a year.
Yeah.
We'll certainly see.
Move it forward on Monday.
Yep, let's move it forward on Monday.
As option E or option B?
E as really modified
E
to
is
the
modified.
40,000 gallon tier 2. And the 8,000 gallon tier 1.
Correct. Staff can bring that forward as an ordinance, is it either in draft form or for first reading?
First reading.
First reading.
We can also accompany it with a couple other recommendations that I read earlier, the directing staff to prepare an enhanced conservation program if you desire. And also, we were right at the time where in the other year, we would have brought forward you the rate increases for 2023. If you would like us to, we could pair those up so that you do both in the same evening. So you do the cuts for 22, and then you at the same time instruct us on 23. Or we could bring it back at a later time and just do one thing Monday night.
I have a feeling with all that we're waiting on answers for, my gut says we maybe don't do that piece on Monday night. Others?
I'm done too.
Yeah, I think
Just
that'll
one
that'll be some confusion added to that for the public.
And I really would like to see how this benchmarks over the next couple months and into the summer to really, I know that you need info for budgeting, especially summertime-ish. But I'd really like to see how the rates are due before we even consider 2023 and understand what we have in 4 months coming on a bigger picture of what we would be tackling in the next 5 to 10 years.
And I think there's one other dimension why I'm only comfortable with 1 year. We're only giving tier 2 $1.50 a thousand. That's all tier 2's getting. Tier 2 is more than half our users. Tier 2 are what makes the city beautiful. Tier 2 is who waters their lawn and trees. And I don't know how much impact $1.50 is going to do to more than half our city and making us more beautiful. But we'll find out.
Well, luckily, we have a lot of parks to make our city beautiful regardless of all the other people with small lots. Just a quick question. When you bring in the, whatever the vote will be, the staff report for Monday, can you have the updated option E with the 40,000?
Yes.
We can see that if we're, impinging on our, being in the black for 10 years.
Could we also, Jody, I think it makes sense because I understand why my colleagues want to wait, but I think that it is imperative that the public, if they didn't listen tonight, at least understand what this is setting us up for over the next 10 years. Is in terms of capital investment, the debt, and that this was not just use the term willy-nilly. I don't know who used that recently, and I was like, did you really just say that? Yeah, that it's thought through, and you guys worked on this. I think that's really important that the public understands that this is a collaborative effort that is actually an effort to fund what this paper says. Granted, it'll be a little bit adjusted.
Is everybody okay?
Yeah, just clarify, Mayor. So we will bring an ordinance in for first reading, which is the modified option E, which is modified only in the sense that we will be lifting the tier 2 maximum to 40,000 gallons and starting the tier 3 at 41,000 and above. That's the only modification we'll make to E. We will not talk, we will present the full financial analysis as an attachment to the memo, and we'll summarize it in the body of the memo when we present the ordinance for first reading. Summarize the financial impacts over time, and we'll put all the key indicators in there. Do you want us to just stay silent on the other things, like looking for the purposes of Monday, like looking at lot size and such. And we'll just keep this focused on an ordinance first reading.
This is what we need for now, and as we move forward and have anything to share with people, we can bring that back. As anybody that listens to this knows, there's going to be some more steps that we want to look at, but I just think we stick with what's being proposed, what we need to vote on, and so they know where they're at going into summer. For me personally, and I haven't talked a lot, you did do exactly what we gave you direction for. We said anywhere from 3 to 4, and that was with the baseline, that would have made 5. So you did exactly what we asked for. I can't thank you enough. And you did, the next day, I mean, I couldn't talk to Jody till about 2:30 that afternoon about some other stuff. He says, well, do you have time around 2:30? That's when I'm free. And he'd been working with you guys. And so I know how you work. You listened, you put the pens and to the computer and did everything we asked you to do. To the counselors, and I know Sarah and Obi, you worked with them. Bruce and Rich, you worked. This was everybody on board trying to figure out how we can make this all work. Everybody's been working tirelessly. There's no right or wrong answer here. We're just trying to figure out what the city needs, how we can make it as affordable as possible, yet how can we keep moving in the direction we need to be a city that is known for great water quality, and by law we have to have this. It is what we have to do, and we have to be able to do it in the best way we can do it. So to all of you and the people behind the scenes that I don't know, please, thank you for everything that you've done, for being here on a special council night. I hope you had a great 3-day weekend, but thank you. And that's it. It is 8:53 and we are done with this session.